Chapter 10:10. Zhouwen realized that if he continued dodging, the magic ball would rebound faster and faster. It would hit him sooner or later, so he decided not to dodge. He pulled out the bronze sparrow sword and slashed at one of the magic balls that bounced towards the blood-colored avatar. Zhouwen was already prepared for the magic ball to suddenly vanish, but the magic ball didn't vanish. It was struck by the bronze sparrow sword. It was somewhat different from what he had imagined. The magic ball didn't seem to be very hard, nor did it have an explosive effect. It didn't have ice or fire, nor did it have the effects of the yellow ball. The black and white magic ball was split into two by Zhouwen before falling to the ground and shattering into powder. In the next second, the devil-like clown appeared on his left. Its sharp black fingernails stabbed at the blood-colored avatar's neck. The clown was very fast. It was definitely at the mythical stage, but Zhouwen's reaction and speed weren't slow either. He extended his hand to block the clown's strike. He originally wanted to use his left hand to block, but he immediately realized that something was amiss. This was because he was thinking of using his left hand, but he moved his right hand. Furthermore, he wanted to block to the left, but his right hand was raised to the right. It was completely different from what he had imagined. In an instant, Zhouwen reacted and understood what had happened. Seeing that the clown's dagger-like fingernails had already touched the skin on the blood-colored avatar's neck and was about to stab in, Zhouwen's body spun like a top and barely dodged the strike. That magic ball actually has the ability to reverse my thoughts and physical actions. If I wanted to go left, it would be right. If I wanted to go up, it would be down. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't have been able to react in time. The more they tried to dodge, the more they would slam into it. Zhouwen's mind was extremely calm. After figuring out the reason, he controlled his body to circle around the clown. It was difficult for an ordinary person to not make mistakes when their thoughts and physical actions were reversed. However, Zhouwen's thoughts were abnormally clear. He didn't make any mistakes as he dodged the clown's attacks again and again. After the blood-colored avatar was struck by the magic ball, the other magic balls didn't attack him again. One of them hit Tyrant Behemoth, and then Tyrant Behemoth showed signs of having its thoughts and physical actions diverging. Tyrant Behemoth clearly didn't have Zhouwen's powerful thinking abilities. It immediately became at a loss. It wanted to charge left, but it charged right. It wanted to retreat, but it advanced. It nearly tripped over its left leg and fell to the ground. Sunday's Mischief Clown is so powerful. Just a Mischief Clown's ability is so strange. I wonder how many Mischief Clowns there are here. If there are as many as usual, ignoring the other dimensional creatures, it would already be very terrifying. Zhouwen thought as he fought. Soon, Zhouwen discovered the secret of the Mischief Clown's magic ball. It turned out that the magic ball didn't know how to pass through walls. Instead, during its flight, it spun at high speeds, causing a rotating aura to appear outside the ball. Once the aura was obstructed or suppressed, the magic ball would automatically deviate from its trajectory and dodge the punch. It would slide from below or from the side, as though it had vanished. In fact, Mischief Clown did not have spatial abilities, but he was very good at throwing magic balls. The dimensional creatures here are really interesting. I wonder if a companion egg will drop? Zhouwen was extremely interested in Sunday's Clown's abilities. Be it the technique of throwing the magic ball or the ability to subvert one's thoughts, they were all very useful. Furthermore, the clown had the ability to move stealthily. If it were anyone else, death would be the only outcome if they couldn't use their companion beasts normally and they couldn't control their bodies. However, these abilities weren't of much use against Zhouwen. Soon, he found an opportunity. When the clown sneaked out again, he used the light concealment sword to kill it. Killed mythical creature, Devil Clown. Nothing dropped. Zhouwen couldn't help but be disappointed. So this isn't a Mischief Clown. It's a real mythical creature. From the looks of it, I have to grind here a few more times in the future. Even if I can't get a companion egg, I can still get a skill crystal. After finishing off the devil clown, Zhou continued walking forward. However, before he could go far, the blood-colored avatar suddenly died and the game screen went black. How did I die? Zhou carefully recalled, but he still didn't know how he died. All he could do was drip his blood to revive again and enter the maze of lies. This time, Zhou didn't see the devil clown on the merry-go-round, so he walked straight ahead. Zhou originally imagined that there would be quite a number of devil clowns here, but he only saw one. He didn't find a second one. When Zhou walked into an ancient castle, he discovered another dimensional creature. This time, it was a divination witch. The divination witch could already be seen in Wednesday's dungeon. She was also an epic dimensional creature. She was an old woman dressed in blue clothes and a blue hat, looking extremely terrifying. She even held a crystal ball in her hand. Her abilities didn't seem impressive. All she could do was use the crystal ball to emit some elemental light wave. However, the divination witch in front of him was completely different. No, it shouldn't be said to be one, but two. The two witches sat side by side behind the long table in the ancient castle. One was dressed in white and had a white hat, while the other was dressed in black and had a black hat. Furthermore, they were both in the form of young girls. They were completely different from the old and ugly witches in the dungeons a few weeks ago. They were rather fair and beautiful. Furthermore, they didn't have crystal balls in their hands. The white-robed witch held a black poker card in her hand, while the black-robed witch held a white poker card in her hand. The two witches sat there and quietly watched Zhou walk into the hall. They had no intention of attacking. Welcome to Fate's Divination House. You can draw a card from our hands to determine your fate. The white-robed witch and the black-robed witch spoke at the same time. Their voices were completely identical. If one closed their eyes, they would think that one person was speaking. Why should I draw your cards? Zhou wasn't interested in playing divination games with them. He drew his sword and slashed at the white-robed witch. The white-robed witch was unexpectedly weak. He was already prepared for a fierce battle, but the white-robed witch fell to the ground and had her head chopped off by the bronze sparrow sword. However, the moment the white-robed witch's head was chopped off, Zhou realized that the blood-colored avatar's head had also fallen. The way it fell was identical to the white-robed witch's head. It was as though it had been chopped off by a sword. The game screen turned black as Zhou welcomed death once again. This dungeon is really sick. What the hell is it? Zhou hadn't died like this in a long time. Everything about the maze of lies was different. Thankfully, this was in-game. Dying once wasn't a big deal. If it were in real life, Zhou definitely wouldn't take the risk in such a dangerous place. I wonder how much Fraud and company know about the maze of lies on Sunday? Zhou felt that helping Fraud this time probably wouldn't go smoothly. Chapter 10-11. On the Cube's ranking, Guardians had already begun challenging each other to obtain a higher ranking. People believed that Guardians should aim for first place. Rankings other than first place didn't seem to be of much use. They should challenge Ya, who was first. However, in fact, no one challenged Ya. The Guardians who were challenged were basically ranked outside the top 5. This also allowed people to finally see the true power of Guardians. Humans with Guardians were equivalent to mythical creatures. Then, they could use various companion beasts and mythical skills. They were far stronger than a single mythical companion beast's overall combat strength. The battle between Guardians was far more complicated and interesting than the battle between companion beasts. Once a companion beast was countered, it was impossible for it to have any hope of turning the tables. However, the battle between Guardians was ever-changing. Any factor could reverse the situation. Apart from Lai's inexplicable disappearance from the rankings, the number of challenges for the Guardians outside the top 5 increased. Many new Guardians also appeared on the rankings. However, it was obvious that they didn't understand each other. They were also testing each other's abilities. They didn't really fight to the death. Furthermore, it was very likely that they were hiding many abilities. Even so, it was still extremely enjoyable for people to watch. Now, a simple battle between companion beasts could no longer attract people's attention. People all over the world were discussing the problem of guardians. There were also people secretly searching for guardian cocoons, hoping to contract them and ascend to the heavens in a single bound. Guardians were just too attractive to ordinary people. As long as they were lucky and obtained the recognition of a guardian, they could ascend to the heavens in a single bound and become a mythical expert. This was more attractive than any treasure. One could clearly sense that there were many new guardians on the rankings. However, the trouble that followed seemed to have just begun. In several places in the Federation, there were incidents of guardians committing crimes. The guardians owned by unknown humans had a terrifyingly high chance of committing crimes. Although the Federation was already trying its best to maintain the situation, its control over various places was weakening day by day. Unless the Guardians took matters into their own hands and went to the territories controlled by the 6 families, the chances of them being able to capture the Guardians were slim. The appearance of Guardians isn't a good thing for the Federation, Sadie, who was watching the news, said with a frown. The current Guardians aren't that terrifying. After all, those who obtained Guardians didn't have a good foundation in the past. After obtaining Guardians, it's not difficult to deal with them. However, with the passage of time, those fellows with Guardians will have all sorts of mythical companion eggs. That will be the true beginning of chaos, Lance said. Isn't life and death going to be decided in a month? Sadie said. A month is only a matter of deciding the ownership of the dimensional wheel, but the war between Guardians has only just begun. To truly resolve the problem of the Guardians, relying on the King of Earth is useless. They are birds of a feather to begin with, Lance said. There's still a way out? Sadie said after some thought. Yes, just kill all the Guardians like Showun, Lance said. How many perverts like Showun can there be in the Federation? Sadie smiled bitterly. Fight poison with poison. Lance slowly uttered these 4 words. Sadie immediately understood what Lance meant. Since Guardians were difficult to eliminate, she could only contract a Guardian herself and use it to kill Guardians. I'm just afraid that there will be future problems, Sadie said. It's better than doing nothing. Lance paused before saying, After I go to the Maze of Lies and obtain the mask, I'll think of a way to contract a Guardian. Sadie wanted to say something, but she opened her mouth and didn't say anything. In this era, the path ahead was shrouded in fog. No one knew which path was correct. Only someone who walked over would know. However, no one knew if the person who had walked over could come back alive. How's the situation on Zhou Wen's side? Lance asked again. He went a few times, but he rarely entered the Maze of Lies. He hasn't entered the dimensional zone after Friday, Sadie answered. That's normal. Let's wait for everyone the family invited to arrive before entering the maze together, Lance said with a slight nod. Zhou entered the Maze of Lies on Sunday again. The devil clown didn't seem to have respawned. Zhou once again arrived at Fate's divination house and saw the twin-like witches. Just like last time, they extended the cards in their hands for Zhou to draw. Zhou thought for a moment and decided to give it a try. He wanted to see what tricks they had up their sleeve. It wouldn't be too late to deal with them after figuring them out. How many do I need to draw? Zhou asked the twin witches. 1, the 2 witches answered in unison. 1 card per deck? Zhou asked as he looked at the 2 different decks of poker cards. Only 1, the witches answered again. Zhou thought for a moment before getting the blood-colored avatar to draw 1 from the black-robed witch's white poker card. This should be something like a tarot card, right? Zhou thought to himself as he flipped the card over. The card he saw had nothing to do with the contents of the tarot card. On the white card was a black symbol. It was a black silhouette. Although it was only a silhouette and its appearance couldn't be seen, one could naturally associate it with a Western mythical figure from the large and long scythe. Is this death? Zhou asked the witch in puzzlement. Yes, the black-robed witch replied with a nod. What does it mean to draw this card? Zhou asked again. It means that death will take away your life, the black-robed witch answered. Just as Zhou was about to say something, he suddenly realized that a black shadow of death that resembled a card had appeared behind the blood-colored avatar. Before the blood-colored avatar could react, the black shadow of death slashed down and killed the blood-colored avatar. The blood-colored avatar's armor didn't work. It was as though death had killed the soul and not the body. Looking at the black screen, Zhou had no choice but to drip his blood to be reborn. This time, Zhou drew a card from the white-robed witch's black poker card. A white poker card can draw a black death, but it shouldn't be able to draw that thing on a black poker card, right? Zhou thought to himself as he drew a black card. Flipping the card over to take a look, Zhou was immediately overjoyed. On the black card there was a white shadow. Even if he couldn't see its appearance clearly, the wings and halo above its head undoubtedly meant that it was an angel card. This should be an angel, right? What does it represent? Did I win? Zhou asked the white-robed witch. No, this means that he will take you to heaven, the white-robed witch said calmly. In the next second, Zhou saw the angel's shadow appear behind the blood-colored avatar. Then, a white beam of light flew out from the blood-colored avatar's head before it fell to the ground and died. The game screen went black again. Sogu. Chapter 10-12. If I choose black, I'll die. If I choose white, I'll also die. I can't kill the witches, so how can I survive? Zhou thought to himself. Of course, he didn't have to choose. With Truth Listener's evil nullification and the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, he might be able to forcefully break through and kill the black and white destiny witches. However, if Zhou wanted to enter the maze of lies with Lance and company in the future, it was best to understand the various abilities of the black and white destiny witches. If anything happened, he would know how to deal with it. In fact, Zhou main goal for grinding this time wasn't to clear it, but to figure out all the information on Sunday's dungeon to prevent anything from happening in reality. After entering the game again, Zhou came in front of the witches again. This time, Zhou wanted to try and see if he could draw a few more cards, but it was useless. After he drew the first white poker card, he touched the other cards, but the cards vanished into thin air. Zhou flipped the card over and saw that there was still a black silhouette on the white poker card. However, this time, it wasn't death, but a black heart. Furthermore, the heart pattern had cracked in the middle. After reading it, Zhou felt the heart in his chest crack open. Then, the game screen went black. Do you have any cards that allow you to live? Zhou asked the two witches when he came in front of them again. Yes, the two witches answered in unison. How many cards are there in total? How many of them allow me to live? Zhou asked again. There are 54 cards in each deck. There are a total of 108 cards in 2 decks, the black-robed witch said. In every deck, there's a card that allows you to live. Your chances are still very high, the white-robed witch said immediately. Zhou's face immediately darkened. In other words, I only have a 1 in 54 chance of drawing a card that allows me to live? In theory, that's the case. However, you can try a few more times. The success rate will naturally be higher, the two witches said in unison. Try my ass. If this were real life, I would have long been dead. How would I have a chance to try? Zhou felt that there was definitely some technique to drawing card. Otherwise, it would be too difficult to get one based on luck. Luck? Wait. Could it be that to kill the Destiny Witches, I need someone with luck, such as Wang Lu? Zhou thought of Wang Lu, who had invincible luck. If she were to draw, she would definitely be able to draw the card that could save her life. If I need a luck skill, I definitely won't get it. Zhou attempted to use Truth Listener's ability to listen to the cards and Dr. Darkness's light of penetration, but it was useless. The cards he saw and heard were all blank. He had no idea what the cards were showing. He had thought of all sorts of cheating methods, but none of them worked. Then, if he wanted to pass this stage, he had to invite Wang Lu. Otherwise, he could only use force. This time, Zhou Wen summoned Truth Listener and activated the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder before drawing cards. However, the first card he drew was an angel. Zhou Wen immediately felt the Truth Listener earring heat up before a large amount of essence energy surged into his body. Although the angel's shadow appeared, it failed to bring the blood-colored avatar's soul to heaven. Seeing that Truth Listener's evil nullification was effective, Zhou Wen continued drawing cards, one after another. The Truth Listener earring kept heating up as primordial energy surged in like a tidal wave. Zhou Wen knew that if it wasn't for Truth Listener's ability, he would have died countless times. When he drew the 37th card, Zhou Wen drew a black mask card from the white card. This time, the Truth Listener earring didn't heat up again, nor did it produce essence energy. At the same time he drew the card, the wall behind the black and white Destiny Witches parted. It was the door that led to the back of the Maze of Lies. In the previous Monday to Saturday dungeons, which castle was already the end. There was no such door, so Zhou Wen didn't know what was behind the door. The black and white witches looked at Zhou Wen from the side without any intention of attacking. From the looks of it, they were rather special dimensional creatures and had no intention of fighting him to the death. Zhou Wen controlled the blood-colored avatar to walk out the door and leave Destiny Witch Castle. After leaving the door, Zhou Wen immediately saw a garden. In the middle of the garden was a strange tree. Zhou Wen felt that this tree looked somewhat similar to the Dead Man tree and the Longevity tree, but there were also some differences. At the very least, there were no fruits on the tree. At the bottom of the tree, there was an old man sitting with his back against the tree. His clothes were torn and tattered. Through the holes, one could see that he was only skin and bones, but his chest was still moving up and down. It seemed that he was not dead yet. As though he heard the blood-colored avatar's footsteps, the elder opened his eyes. His eye sockets were deep and his eyes looked extremely turbid. "Young man, it's great that I met you. I finally don't have to die with a huge secret," the elder said weakly. Without any thought, Zhou Wen drew his sword and slashed at him. Who was he kidding? This was a game, not reality. It was impossible for humans to exist in-game. No matter how much the elder looked human, Zhou Wen was certain that he was definitely not human. Just as the bronze sparrow sword was about to strike the elder, who looked like he was on the verge of death, suddenly erupted with terrifying strength. He leaped up and rushed into the sky at an unbelievable speed, dodging Zhou Wen's strike. When the elder was in midair, his body had already changed. He transformed into Zhou Wen's appearance before charging at him with extremely strange movement technique. Zhou Wen couldn't be bothered to fight him. He summoned his mythical team and surrounded him. In the next second, the monster that had transformed into Zhou Wen emitted a white fog before transforming into the great Might Vajra bull. When the two bulls stood together, it was impossible to tell which was real and which was fake. Unfortunately, the great Might Vajra bull was Zhou Wen's companion beast. It was mentally connected to him, so he could naturally tell the difference at a glance. No matter how the dimensional creature changed, it was quickly beaten to death. Killed mythical creature, shape-shifting beast. Discovered dimensional crystal. Zhou Wen glanced at the crystal and realized that it was only an ordinary stat crystal. He was immediately disappointed. Although there are many mythical creatures in the Maze of Lies on Sunday, the drop rate isn't very good. Zhou Wen thought carefully and realized that he had only killed 2 mythical creatures, a devil clown and a shape-shifting beast. It wasn't considered a lot. In the entire garden, there was only one shape-shifting beast. There were no other dimensional creatures, nor was there any other way out. Zhou Wen glanced at the tree and could only return the way he came. He passed through Witch Castle and returned to the amusement park-like maze before continuing his exploration. Sogu. Chapter 10-13. In order to clear the maze of lies and obtain the mask inside, apart from the experts of the Ultimate Family Clan, they had also invited some experts with mythical companion beasts. However, among these people, there were very few members of the 6 families. They were basically the leaders of the various wealthy families in the North District. In the East District, they had a status equivalent to Entienzua. It could be seen that the Ultimate Family Clan had high prestige in the North District. Furthermore, the wealthy families in the North District were relatively united, unlike the East District and West District, which had intense internal strife. Although Fraud was one of the 6 heroes, he was trapped in the ice cavern and couldn't move freely. Now, the actual person in charge of the Ultimate Family Clan was Gaiman. After the invited experts arrived, Gaiman planned on holding a meeting to explain the general situation. At the same time, he wanted to introduce Zhou to them. As Zhou had already said in advance that he had to have the right to decide, Gaiman was the leader for this operation, but he still needed to listen to Zhou. Inform Zhou of tomorrow's meeting, Gaiman said to his secretary. The secretary responded, but he didn't leave immediately. What's the matter? Gaiman asked Gamar. According to our observations over the past few days, Zhou has at most entered the maze of lies on Friday. He hasn't entered the maze of lies on Sunday at all. Is it really good to give him a veto? This concerns the fate of our Ultimate Family Clan, Gamar said. The old master naturally has his reasons for making such a decision. Furthermore, that Zhou is indeed someone with true talent. You saw his battle with Lai. To be able to defeat a guardian with an epic body without any external help, how many people in the Federation can do that? Gaiman said. Zhou is very strong. There's no doubt about that, but strength is different from having the ability to command. I'm afraid that problems will arise because of his decision, Gamar said. There's no rush. We still have time to get used to each other. Go and relay the news of the meeting. With that said, Gaiman lowered his head and continued organizing the document. Gamar had no choice but to leave the office and arrange for someone to inform Zhou to attend tomorrow's meeting. After Zhou received the meeting notice, he readily agreed. He already had a relatively detailed understanding of the Sunday dungeon, but he had yet to find the mask that Fraud had mentioned. The Ultimate Family Clan still had some secret information about the Maze of Lies that they hadn't released. They would likely release that information at the meeting. Zhou wanted to know how much they knew about Sunday's dungeon. The next morning, Zhou took Yer out to attend the meeting when he saw a girl alighting from a car. Wang Lu? Why are you here? Zhou asked Wang Lu in surprise. Old Mr. Gaiman asked me to help, so I came. Wang Lu was wearing a white fox fur coat that accentuated her baby-like skin. From Wang Lu's words, Zhou knew that the Ultimate Family Clan had studied the Maze of Lies on Sunday. There was a high chance that they had invited Wang Lu to deal with the Destiny Witches. This operation is very dangerous. Why did you agree to come? Zhou frowned. Wang Lu smiled and said, Our family has many business dealings with the North District. Furthermore, old Mr. Gaiman has repeatedly guaranteed my safety. In addition, I heard that you are here and will participate in this operation. What else do I have to worry about? Don't you agree? You can't say that. It's best to be careful. This dimensional zone is indeed very strange. You mustn't be careless, Zhou exhorted. The two of you, the family head is already waiting for you inside. A staff member came to welcome them. The two of them had no choice but to chat as they walked. Nothing happened to Wang Lu and it was very peaceful. Although Wang Chan would occasionally get into trouble, with Wang Lu's life providence suppressing her, nothing major would happen. When the two of them entered the meeting hall together, many people looked over. In the entire meeting hall, only the two of them weren't from the North District. Furthermore, Zhou had recently killed Joseph, who had a guardian. This caused quite a stir in the North District. Gaiman introduced the two of them to everyone at the right time and said, When attacking the Maze of Lies, there are some key areas that require the help of the two of them. They are an indispensable part of this operation. This is because there's no way to communicate verbally after entering the maze of lies. Therefore, there are some things that need to be clarified before we go. We also need to practice for a period of time in advance to prevent any problems from happening after entering the dimensional zone. After arranging for Zhou and Wang Lu to sit down, Gaiman explained the detailed plan. The Ultimate Family clan knew quite a lot about Sunday's dungeon. They also knew the abilities of the Devil Clown and the Destiny Witches and explained them in detail. From Gaiman's description, Zhou knew that they had paid the price of many lives to obtain this information. However, their intelligence wasn't more than Zhou's, nor was it as detailed. Furthermore, Zhou realized that they hadn't been able to pass the Destiny Witches test and reach the garden at the back. The reason he had invited Wang Lu all the way back was to deal with the Destiny Witches. They had to pass the Destiny Witches test to reach the final garden. However, there was something that puzzled Zhou. Gaiman and company had clearly failed to pass the Destiny Witches test and reach the final garden. However, they seemed very certain that the mask was behind Witch Castle. As long as they defeated the Destiny Witches, they would have a chance of obtaining the mask. Strange, why didn't I see that mask in the garden? Zhou had already carefully looked through the entire garden, but he didn't discover the mask that Fraud had mentioned. As for the plan that Gaiman and company had come up with, everything was prepared to pass through Witch Castle. It would be fun if they couldn't find the mask after entering the garden. Furthermore, there was a shape-shifting beast in the garden. It was fine if Zhou entered alone, but the others were companion beasts. No matter who the shape-shifting beast transformed into, Zhou could tell. However, with so many people entering together, it would be difficult to distinguish if the shape-shifting beast transformed into anyone other than Zhou. After explaining the plan, Gaiman asked Zhou, "Zhou, what do you think?" The others' gazes landed on Zhou. "I have a question. Since no one has defeated the witch, it means that no one has reached the place outside the castle. How do you know that there must be a mask there?" Zhou asked Gaiman. Yes. Chapter 10:14. Actually, my father once went to the back of Witch Castle a long time ago and saw the mask there. Therefore, the mask is behind Witch Castle. There's no mistake about that, Gaiman said. So old hero Fraud has been there before. Then there's no mistake, a big shot from the North District said. Everyone nodded. From the looks of it, Fraud's reputation in the North District was indeed unparalleled. Just the mention of his name made everyone reveal looks of awe. So the old hero has been there before. I wonder where the old hero saw the mask? Zhou continued asking. This was because he knew that there was only a garden behind and no mask. Therefore, he had to clarify things. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time for so many people to take the risk. Gaiman said with a smile, "Behind Witch Castle is a garden. My father saw the mask there. Unfortunately, my father was alone back then. He was afraid that taking the mask would trigger a dimensional zone anomaly, so he didn't take it back." Where's the garden? Zhou believed Gaiman when he saw that there was a garden behind. After all, it was impossible for him to know that there was a garden behind if he hadn't been there. According to my father, the mask is embedded in a tombstone in the middle of the garden, Gaiman answered. Zhou couldn't help but frown when he heard that. He thought to himself, that's strange. Why did I only see a tree in the middle of the garden? I didn't see any tombstones. Zhou couldn't figure out what was wrong. What he saw in-game definitely couldn't be wrong, but if Fraud hadn't been there, he wouldn't have known that there was a garden behind it. Zhou had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. After some thought, he asked, I wonder if you can tell me the details of the situation back then? Aren't you being a little too rude? Mr. Gaiman has already explained it very clearly. Furthermore, old hero Fraud saw it with his own eyes. What else can you doubt? Do you want the old hero to crawl out of his grave and explain it to you personally before you believe him? Someone felt that Zhou was being too rude when they saw him press on with such urgency. Furthermore, they didn't know that Fraud wasn't really dead, which was why they said that. Gaiman waved his hand and said, "After all, this matter is of great importance. It's good that Zhou is cautious. Zhou, did you discover something wrong?" No. Zhou could only shake his head. He couldn't possibly say that he had already been there in-game and that there were no tombstones or masks. Gaiman continued explaining the plan and even played some 3D animations. There were introductions to the skills of dimensional creatures like devil clowns and divination witches. However, this introduction was clearly not comprehensive enough. It only introduced a portion of the skills. After the meeting ended, Gaiman called out to Zhou. "Zhou, if it's convenient, follow me." "I'll wait for you outside," Wang Lu said when she saw Zhou look over. "All right." Zhou followed Gaiman to his office. Gaiman looked at Zhou and asked, "If you have anything to say, why don't you say it now? After entering the maze of lies, it'll be very troublesome if anything happens." "Can I meet the old hero again? I want to know the details of when he saw the mask," Zhou said. "You might not know this, but my father was trapped in the ice wall. He couldn't communicate with anyone at all times. Most of the time, he was just an ice sculpture. Occasionally, he would regain some consciousness. When you met him previously, it was already the last moment when he was relatively conscious. Not long after that, he turned into an ice sculpture. I don't know when he will wake up again." After a pause, Gaiman added, "However, my father recorded the situation in detail. If you need it, I can make a copy for you." "Then I'll be troubling you." Since he couldn't see Fraud, he had no choice but to do so. Gaiman quickly handed a copy to Zhou. "If you discover anything, remember to inform us immediately." "I will. I'll head back first." Zhou flipped through the document and realized that there were more than 10 pages of content. Many things were recorded, and he probably couldn't finish reading them in a short time. He planned on taking them back to read slowly. Gaiman got his secretary to send Zhou out. When the secretary returned, he said in puzzlement, "Do you really believe that Zhou discovered anything? It doesn't matter if I believe it or not. It's better to be safe than sorry. We can't afford to make any mistakes in this matter. It's best if he doesn't discover anything. If he does, it'll be beneficial to us," Gaiman said. Zhou arrived at the door and saw Wang Lu, Lance, and company waiting for him. "Zhou, did you discover anything?" Lance was also present back then, but because everyone present was his elder, he didn't have the right to speak. "I have a nagging feeling that something is amiss, but I can't tell what it is. If only I can meet your great-grandfather again," Zhou said. "Great-grandfather's situation is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Even if I meet him now, there's no way for me to communicate," Lance said with a sigh. "Then let me think about it. After all, there's still a period of time to get used to each other. We won't immediately head to the maze of lies. We still have time." Zhou flipped through the document. According to the records, it was not long after he discovered the maze of lies. At that time, Fraud didn't know that the state of the maze of lies was different every day. The last time he entered was on Monday, and he didn't go for a few days. On Sunday, he wanted to enter the maze of lies again, but the outcome was obvious. Thankfully, when Fraud saw that the situation wasn't right, he released his companion beasts to resist the devil clown. He wanted to escape the maze of lies at full speed. Unfortunately, there was no chance. Fraud was hit by the black and white magic ball before losing control of his body. The devil clown that appeared stealthily used its dagger-like nails to cut the artery on his neck. Before long, he fainted. Fraud originally thought that he was doomed, but to his surprise, he woke up not long after. Back then, he was in a small, sealed space. Fraud pushed hard for a long time before he pushed open the lid. When he crawled out, he realized that he was lying in a grave. On the tombstone in front of the grave, he discovered the mask. And the location of the grave was the garden Zhou had seen in-game. When Fraud escaped from the garden, he saw the Destiny twin witches and the castle. Only then did he know that the garden was behind Witch Castle. Strange, how did he enter the garden? Who had brought him in? Are there really graves and tombstones in the garden in real life? Zhou was still puzzled when he read the information. Chapter 10-15. After returning to his residence, Zhou switched on his phone and entered Sunday's Maze of Lies again. He passed the Destiny Witch's card draw test and arrived at the garden again. This time, Zhou looked very carefully. There was indeed no tomb in the garden, much less the tombstone and mask that Fraud had described. There was only one tree in the middle of the garden. It stood in the middle of the garden like a huge umbrella. There's indeed no tomb or mask in-game. I can only go to reality to see if there's one. Zhou glanced at the tree and was somewhat unwilling to return. He summoned the bronze sparrow sword and slashed at the tree. He wanted to dig up the tree to take a look. Perhaps there was really a tomb under the tree. The bronze sparrow sword slashed at the roots of the tree with terrifying flames. It only managed to cut in less than 3 centimeters before it stopped. The flames failed to burn the tree. To be more precise, the trunk and leaves became even brighter and more vibrant in the flames. Zhou summoned the bronze sparrow sword back and saw magma-like liquid flow out of the wound on the tree. Furthermore, after the liquid flowed out, it quickly cooled and turned into ashes. The wounds on the tree quickly healed. This is a plant-type mythical creature? As Zhou was thinking, he suddenly saw the blood-colored avatar collapse to the ground. The game screen turned black. How did it die? Zhou felt that he needed to figure out the true situation in the garden. He had a nagging feeling that this operation wouldn't go smoothly. After entering the garden again, Zhou summoned Tyrant Behemoth to see if he could uproot the tree. In its absolute strength state, Tyrant Behemoth could be considered peak strength among mythical creatures. After it gigantified, it half-squatted and held the tree trunk with both hands before pulling it up. Tree roots broke out of the ground as the entire garden trembled. However, the tree ultimately wasn't uprooted. Seeing that Tyrant Behemoth couldn't do it on its own, it summoned Torch Dragon, Black Dragon, Vajra Bull, and other companion beasts to uproot the tree. Under the pull of the mythical companion beasts, the tree's roots snapped one by one as magma-like liquid flowed out. Then, it turned to dust and vanished, but it still couldn't be uprooted. Suddenly, the blood-colored avatar collapsed to the ground again, and the game screen turned black. Could it be that the liquid flowing out of the tree has some special power that killed me? In order to prove this judgment, Zhou didn't do anything after entering the garden again. He got the blood-colored avatar to stand in the garden and wait slowly. This was also to verify another guess. This was because Zhou realized that the timing of the blood-colored avatar's baffling deaths seemed to be very similar. Time ticked by. When it was an hour after the blood-colored avatar entered the garden, it died without any warning and the game screen went black again. This time should be quite similar to the time of the previous death. Zhou conducted many more experiments to figure out what was going on. Things were more complicated than Zhou imagined. The results of the experiments were different. Gaiman sent someone to invite Zhou to participate in the training, but Zhou rejected him. If it were in the past, Zhou would have had the intention to cooperate, but now, he knew very well that he had to figure out why the blood-colored avatar had died as soon as possible. Otherwise, it was very likely that no one would survive this operation. Zhou didn't participate on the first day, and Gaiman didn't say anything. However, he didn't go on the second and third days. Ignoring Gaiman, even the tycoons who came from other places had a lot of opinions about Zhou. What's this? Does he think he's impressive just because he has some strength? Does he think it's beneath him to be associated with us? The people from the North District had a fiery temper to begin with. Zhou's actions naturally displeased them. He's Wang Mingyuan's disciple. He has people above him. Even if dimensional creatures occupy Earth, he can live very well. Can you do it? If you can't, shut up, another tycoon mocked. He doesn't come to the training, but he has the final say. If he randomly gives orders, do we have to listen to him and send ourselves to our deaths? Mr. Gaiman, do you think this is appropriate? Someone questioned Gaiman. Zhou might have some matters to resolve. After the matter is resolved, he should come. Everyone, calm down. As Gaiman comforted everyone, he secretly found Lance, Sadie, and company to get them to see what was going on with Zhou. Although Lance and Sadie felt that Zhou wasn't an arrogant person, they were puzzled that Zhou didn't even participate in the training. Therefore, they went to Zhou's residence. Before they arrived at Zhou's place, they encountered Wang Lu, who was carrying and bags of snacks. Wang Lu didn't participate in the training either. However, as Wang Lu was only in charge of drawing cards from the Destiny Witches, and she could only draw cards by herself, she didn't need to cooperate with others. Furthermore, she didn't have any decision-making power, so no one requested her to participate in the training. Wang Lu, why did you buy so many snacks? Didn't I get someone to arrange a chef for you? Is the food not to your liking? Sadie asked in puzzlement. No, the food is very good, but Zhou is in his room, cultivating. He doesn't want to go out, so he got me to buy some food and drinks for him, Wang Lu said. I see. What kind of cultivation is Coach doing? Sadie asked. This. I'm not too sure either. Wang Lu's expression changed slightly. Zhou was basically gaming in his room. There was no cultivation. She only felt that it wasn't good to say that Zhou was gaming, so she changed it to cultivation at the last moment. We naturally trust Zhou's character, but there are many doubts from others. Furthermore, it's better for us to familiarize ourselves with each other's abilities in battle. I still hope he can participate in the training, Lance said. As the few of them spoke, they went to Zhou's room. When they arrived at the door, Wang Lu knocked and said, Zhou, open up. I bought something. Lance and company are here to see you. By saying that, Wang Lu naturally hoped that Zhou would restrain himself a little and not let Lance and company see him gaming. However, when Zhou opened the door, he was still playing with his phone. This was because the situation in the Maze of Lies was beyond his expectations. He still hadn't completely resolved the problem. Now, Zhou had to resolve the problem before the team entered the Maze of Lies. Otherwise, apart from him, everyone who entered would die. Chapter 10:16. This wasn't an alarmist talk, because Zhou discovered that the Maze of Lies on Sunday had a terrifying taboo power. Unless one had an ability like the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder that could restrain taboo powers, the moment one stepped into the Maze of Lies on Sunday, it was equivalent to activating the countdown to death. According to Zhou's constant testing during this period of time, he realized that if he didn't enter Witch Castle within 3 hours after entering the Maze of Lies, he would be killed by the taboo power. This was the power of the rules. No matter where he was, as long as he didn't leave the Maze of Lies, he couldn't avoid it. If he entered Witch Castle within 3 hours, he could obtain a 2-hour countdown to death. If he couldn't pass through the Destiny Witch's obstruction and enter the garden within 2 hours, he would also be killed by the taboo power. After entering the garden, the countdown to death became an hour. He could only stay in the garden for an hour at most. Otherwise, he would still die. What was even more terrifying was that the countdown to death in each area wouldn't reset just because he entered the next area, nor would it stop. In other words, if he spent 2.5 hours in the maze area, the countdown to the maze area would end half an hour after entering Witch Castle. Returning to the maze area at this time would still result in death. Therefore, although it seemed like the time limit in the first 2 areas was relatively long, it was actually impossible for him to spend that much time there. Otherwise, even if he really obtained the mask, he wouldn't be able to leave. Zhou had the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, so he wasn't afraid. However, if Wang Lu, Lance, and company exceeded the time limit, only death awaited them. These were the rules that Zhou had already tested, but this wasn't all of Sunday's rules. The other problems were still being tested. Zhou, are you alright? Lance and Sadie didn't have any special reaction to Zhou gaming. This was because they were already used to Zhou gaming, so they didn't find anything strange. Me? I'm fine. The blood-colored avatar died again in-game. Zhou put away his phone and looked at Lance and company in puzzlement, unsure why they were asking. Coach, don't tell me you play games in your room all day? Sadie's expression turned even odder as she asked Zhou. That's right. Is there a problem? Zhou looked at Sadie in puzzlement. As expected, Wang Lu held her forehead helplessly. She knew that Zhou wouldn't lie. Lance smiled and said, You are very calm. It seems that you already have a card up your sleeve. However, the others are a little worried that you will give the wrong order because you don't understand their abilities. If you have time, you should go and watch their training. At least you can understand their abilities. This is also a good thing. Zhou sighed softly and said, That's why I feel that it's better if I go alone. I don't want to bring them along. Zhou's words came from the bottom of his heart. If he had gone alone, he could have activated evil nullification and the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder the entire way. He didn't need to worry about their lives, nor did he need to study them so clearly. There was no power inside that could kill him. In reality, it was not difficult for a person to rush into the garden to see if there was a mask. However, firstly, the ultimate family clan definitely wouldn't be at ease letting him enter alone. They were afraid that he would take the mask for himself. Secondly, there was no time or opportunity for him to enter alone. Gaiman had already decided to bring someone into the maze of lies the next Sunday. Lance and Sadie looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Zhou's thoughts were more straightforward than they had expected. He actually treated all the powerhouses in the North District as a burden. They naturally knew that it was impossible for Zhou to enter the maze of lies alone. All Lance could do was say, There are benefits to having more people. After all, the maze of lies is too strange. If anything happens, even if they can't help, they can disperse some firepower. Why don't? Just as Lance was about to say that it was better for him to take a look, Sadie interrupted him and said, Coach, I suddenly remembered that we have something to do. We'll head back first. With that said, Sadie pulled Lance away quickly. What's going on? Lance asked Sadie in puzzlement when he arrived at the Nobody. Sadie said, Do you want Coach to go to the training ground to take a look? That's right. At least appease the experts in those places, Lance said. However, Sadie said, that will probably be worse. Why? Lance was momentarily taken aback. Based on my understanding of Coach, even if he goes to the training ground, he will definitely find a place to lie down and game. Do you think it's better for him to go or not to go in such a situation? Sadie said. Lance was immediately enlightened as he nodded. That makes sense. The two of them had no choice but to relay what Zhou had said to Gaiman. When Gaiman heard that, he couldn't help but frown slightly. Zhou is indeed very capable, but he's so arrogant. He doesn't take this operation to heart at all. Isn't he taking it too lightly? Clan leader, I think Coach naturally has his reasons for saying that. Sadie was very confident in Zhou. What reason? He hasn't even entered the maze of lies on Sunday. I'm afraid he will suffer greatly if he's so arrogant. Gaiman was already secretly wondering if he should leave the final decision to Zhou. Although Fraud had promised to give him the right to decide, he couldn't just watch Zhou make some unreasonable decisions when he was out in the open, right? Gaiman had already decided that if Zhou's decision was the same as his, he would listen to Zhou for the time being. If it wasn't the same, he would follow his own opinion. He believed that the people from the Ultimate Family Clan and the experts from the other places would listen to his orders. Zhouwen wasn't in the mood to think so much. There were less than 2 days left until Sunday. He had to figure out all the details as soon as possible. The repeated deaths in-game deepened Zhouwen's understanding of the maze of lies. In the final period of time, he was basically studying the tree and the way to kill it. Although this tree might not exist in reality, there was no harm in being careful. It was always good to make more preparations. This tree was extraordinary. It could also kill people, but the way it killed people wasn't that obvious, but it was even stranger. Time passed quickly. Seeing that there were less than a few hours left until Sunday, Zhouwen suddenly felt a strange energy fluctuation emit from his body. Neonate's evolution is complete. Zhouwen was overjoyed when he figured out the source of the fluctuation. Chapter 10:17. Zhouwen had long been looking forward to the completion of demonic neonate's evolution. Now it was finally out. He hurriedly summoned demonic neonate, but she didn't seem to have changed much. She wore ink-purple armor and hugged a demonic sword. She didn't even seem to have grown taller. Appearance isn't important. Elemental abilities are the foundation. Zhouwen hurriedly looked at demonic neonate's stats. All he wanted to know was how demonic neonate's wheel of destiny had changed after returning to the mythical stage. Demon infant, mythical, evolvable, life providence, son of dimension life soul, supreme true demon wheel of fortune, 1 turn. Terror transformation, demon king, S-grade, strength, 81 speed, 81 constitution, 81 essence energy, 81 innate skill. Demon sword companion form, none. Terror transformation. Zhouwen was dumbfounded. Demonic neonate had just advanced to the mythical stage. Although the wheel of destiny he was looking forward to hadn't changed, she actually had the ability to transform into her terror form. He was pleasantly surprised. Isn't this a little too powerful? She has a terror form just after advancing to the mythical stage? Zhouwen wanted to know what demonic neonate's terror transformation was like. He summoned demonic neonate in-game and made her enter a fear state. Demonic aura spewed out from demonic neonate's body, but in the next second, she vanished in front of Zhouwen. Zhouwen knew that he hadn't made demonic neonate move, so she wouldn't randomly move. Since she wasn't moving, it was likely an invisibility ability. Is it invisibility? Zhouwen could vaguely sense that demonic neonate was in front of him, but he couldn't see her with the naked eye. Zhouwen tried using the demon god body, but he still couldn't see demonic neonate. When he switched to Supreme Hell King, he still couldn't see her. However, he could vaguely see some strange fluctuations in the space there. They were extremely minute, and even in Supreme Hell King's state, it was extremely difficult to detect them. Zhouwen was somewhat depressed. He wanted to see what demonic neonate's terror transformation looked like, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see it. It was as though demonic neonate had really vanished. Zhouwen extended his palm, but he couldn't touch demonic neonate. However, he could sense that she was standing there without moving. Alright, it's fine if you can't see. Let's see what your ability is like. Zhouwen thought for a moment. Today happened to be the day the 9 black dragons in the underground sea respawned. He could go there to grind again. After entering the underground sea, Zhouwen only summoned demonic neonate. He didn't summon any other companion beasts. The 9 black dragons saw Zhouwen, but they didn't immediately release their chains. All they did was size up demonic neonate in puzzlement. When the 9 black dragons saw the mythical companion beast at the same time, they would definitely break free of their shackles. Now, they didn't do so immediately. There was only one reason: they couldn't see demonic neonate. At most, they were about the same as Zhouwen. They only felt that the space there was a little strange, so they didn't immediately break free of their shackles. Demonic neonate, let me see how strong you are. Zhouwen's heart stirred as he ordered demonic neonate to kill the 9 black dragons. In the next second, Zhouwen suddenly saw dragon blood spewing out as a black dragon's head was beheaded. It died a violent death without even knowing how it died. Then, Zhou saw an extremely strange scene. The black dragons were spinning around like headless flies. They had no way of discovering what was attacking them. By the time they sensed something, their heads had already been chopped off. Clang! 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 Moments later, the 9 black dragons were killed in the seawater, dyeing the nearby seawater blood-red. 2-dimensional crystals and a companion egg drop. Too powerful! Zhou was pleasantly surprised. In front of the terrifying demonic neonate, the mythical demon blood true dragon was slaughtered like chickens and dogs. Zhou had seen quite a number of experts in their terror form, but none as strong as demonic neonate. The dimensional crystals were useless, but the companion egg had a attribute that Zhou didn't have. This way, Zhou had 4 of the 9 demon blood true dragons. I think I can give it a try. What will happen if I kill the guardian inside? Zhou stared at the war chariot at the bottom of the sea. In the past, he couldn't defeat the guardian, but now, ignoring Zhou's strength, just demonic neonate's terror form should be invincible. Without any hesitation, he opened the war chariot's door and ordered demonic neonate to kill the guardian inside. Crack! The cocoon of the guardian was split into 2. The 6-fingered guardian that resembled an emperor appeared in Zhou's line of sight. Although he couldn't see it, Zhou could roughly guess that demonic neonate hadn't taken action. She had only used the demonic sword to slice open the guardian cocoon. Unfortunately, Zhou couldn't see the demonic sword in its terror form. The guardian seemed to be able to see demonic neonate. He stared intently at demonic neonate with a pale face. The invisible demonic sword slashed down again. The 6-fingered guardian seemed to be able to see the demonic sword. The ring on his finger lit up at the same time as it rapidly spun. His figure also teleported away. However, when he teleported out, his body was split into 2 by the sword. In the next second, a scene that left Zhou dumbfounded appeared. The demonic sword suddenly revealed its body as demonic aura surged on it, condensing into Grim Demon's figure. He actually grabbed the guardian's body and devoured it. In a few mouthfuls, he devoured the guardian's corpse cleanly before automatically returning to the demonic sword and quickly vanishing. Grim Demon is still here? Zhou was slightly surprised. He imagined that Grim Demon would be absorbed by demonic neonate. Killed Guardian Demon Master. A notification popped up in-game. So this guardian is called Demon Master. Unfortunately, such a powerful guardian was killed by demonic neonate just like that. There's no time to reveal his abilities to the world. Zhou's heart stirred as he recalled the guardian in Ant City. However, on second thought, it didn't seem useful for him to kill the guardian now. It wouldn't be too late to kill him when he had the time in the future. The most important thing now was to finish off the tree in the maze of lies. Previously, so many companion beasts had failed to kill the tree. The Ice Dragon King items in their terror form couldn't be brought into the game. Zhou had been worried about this. Now that he had demonic neonate in her terror form, it shouldn't be a problem for him to slice through the tree. He brought demonic neonate to the maze of lies and arrived at the garden. Before Zhou could give demonic neonate an order, demonic neonate walked towards the tree. As demonic neonate approached, the tree that had been motionless like a mountain and didn't react at all actually moved. Its leaves swayed and the tree trembled. Its roots rose up, revealing a tree hole. Demonic neonate walked towards the tree hole. Zhou hurriedly controlled the blood-colored avatar to follow and see what was inside the tree hole. Sogu. Chapter 10:18. At the entrance of the tree hole, there was a strange spatial distortion. When he passed through the tree hole, he felt a slight spatial fluctuation. After entering the tree hole, the scene he saw left Zhou slightly taken aback. Inside the tree hole was a wooden hut. It wasn't the tomb and tombstone that Zhou had imagined. All the utensils in the wooden hut seemed to be carved from the tree itself. Wooden bed, wooden table, wooden stools, wooden shelves, and all sorts of utensils looked simple but artistic. On the wooden shelves were many books. There was even an open book on the table, as though someone had been reading it. However, Zhou didn't see any other creatures after looking through the entire wooden hut. This is a game. Logically speaking, only dimensional items can appear in-game. Could it be that these books are dimensional items? Zhou saw that demonic neonate had already walked to the wooden table and was looking at the open book on the desk. Zhou leaned over to take a look and realized that he didn't recognize a single word on it. It was a mess of words that he didn't know. In any case, Zhou didn't understand a single word. Demonic neonate extended her tiny hand and the book flew up by itself. It arrived in front of her and floated above her palm. After demonic neonate evolved, she actually became fond of reading. This is a good phenomenon. Zhou was rather gratified. Demonic neonate was good at everything, but her personality was too ferocious. She usually didn't speak at all, and when she attacked, she killed with one strike. She didn't give others a chance to counterattack, like a cold and heartless killer. Although demonic neonate was impeccable as a companion beast, Zhou felt that she was an intelligent creature with feelings after all. It was better to have some humanity. Reading could enrich one's emotions. This seemed to be a good sign. Neonate, what's written here? Before Zhou could finish his sentence, he saw demonic neonate grab the two sides of the book with both hands and open her mouth. She ate the book like she was eating a cake. Zhou looked at demonic neonate in a daze, unable to say a word. He realized that he had misunderstood something. However, demonic neonate didn't stop at all. She opened her mouth and swallowed the entire book in a few mouthfuls. After eating, she still didn't have enough. She walked to the bookshelf and devoured the other books one by one. After eating, she licked her lips, looking as though she hadn't had enough. Why did you eat those books? Zhou finally reacted and asked demonic neonate in puzzlement. Food. Demonic neonate only said 2 words. Zhou was helpless. It was unlikely for him to get demonic neonate to explain. He still didn't know what those books were. Suddenly, the screen turned black. The blood-colored avatar had died again. How could this be? The 1-hour time limit in the garden should not be up yet, right? Could it be that there's a different time limit in the treehouse? Zhou guessed as he launched the dungeon again. Now, Zhou was certain that there were no masks in-game. There was only a treehouse in the tree. Is fraud lying, or is reality really different? Zhou was almost confident that he could bring Wang Lu, Lance, and company out alive, but there were some things he still wanted to figure out. After entering the garden again, the tree automatically opened the entrance to the wooden hut when it saw demonic neonate. This time, Zhou paid special attention to the time inside the tree hole and discovered an extremely strange phenomenon. After all, the flow of time in the tree hole's wooden hut was much faster than outside. An hour outside was only a minute here. Zhou also realized the changes in his body after using the 8 perfections Wisdom and Supreme Hell King. From this, he determined that the flow of time here was different. Even if he used the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, it was useless against the abnormal time flow here. This was because such a time flow was normal in the tree hole's wooden hut. It wasn't some taboo power. The books in the wooden hut didn't respawn again. Zhou hurriedly left the tree hole. This was because the flow of time was too fast if he stayed there. He aged too quickly. He was afraid that it would affect his true body. That wouldn't be good. Thankfully, it was only a game and didn't affect his true body. However, the secret of the garden seemed to end there. There were no tombs or masks. Now that Zhou knew Sunday's dungeon like the back of his hand, he just waited to head to the maze of lies in reality tomorrow to see if it was different. While it was still early, Zhou made another trip to the underground sea. The cocoon in the war wagon hadn't respawned, so he didn't know if it would respawn in the future. With the underground sea's guardian gone, Zhou made another trip to Ant City. I've been tortured by Ant City's guardian for so long. Now I can finally retaliate. Zhou was somewhat excited. Ant City was a dungeon that came with the phone. Ant City's guardian was also the first guardian Zhou had seen. Zhou was still looking forward to killing Ant City's guardian and clearing the dungeon. He stormed all the way to City Ant and directly destroyed the golden flying ant's nest, completely exposing the guardian egg. Neonate, kill it. Zhou floated in the air, waiting to watch Ant City's guardian be killed. After demonic Neonate's terror transformation, her figure vanished from Zhou's eyes. At the same time, he couldn't see the demonic sword as it instantly cleaved open the guardian cocoon. Zhou saw Ant City's guardian again. At this moment, Ant City's guardian seemed to have grown a lot. Zhou remembered that the last time he saw her, she still looked like a young girl, but now she looked completely mature. Her entire body emitted the charm of a mature woman. Her devilish curves, orange-red pupils, long hair, and hot figure made Zhou almost not dare to look straight at her. However, Zhou acutely realized that the antennae on the guardian's head and the transparent wings on its back had disappeared. It looked no different from a human. This is the first time I've seen a guardian that can constantly grow. What's this fellow's background? I wonder which dimensional race she represents? Just as Zhou was thinking, the terraformed demonic sword slashed at the guardian again. Typical guardians couldn't even see it, much less resist it. Just as Zhou thought that the guardian was about to be killed, he saw the guardian's jade-like hands clasp together and grab the demonic sword that was slashing down. At the same time, a strange energy fluctuation spread out from the jade-like hands. With the terrifying energy fluctuation, the guardian's figure vanished in front of Zhou. Oh no! Zhou suddenly realized something and quickly retreated. Chapter 10-19. Boom! Zhou felt demonic neonate move at high speeds. In the next second, the terrifying collision produced an unimaginable explosion and shockwave. The entire ant city was instantly reduced to ruins. The blood-colored avatar relied on the shell dragon armor's absolute defense to block the terrifying strike, but in the next second, Zhou felt his heart palpitate. An invisible force struck the blood-colored avatar's body and penetrated the armor, causing the blood-colored avatar's body to explode. The game screen went black. Terror transformation. That fellow hasn't even come out of the guardian cocoon. He already has the ability to transform into the terror form. Zhou was alarmed. Zhou knew very well that it was the power of the terror transformation. Furthermore, it was one of the stronger ones. At the same time, one of Zhou's previous guesses was confirmed. Demonic Neonate's Great Demon King state wasn't an invisibility state. It could even be said that it wasn't invisibility at all. However, because the life form in the terror form was too high level, he couldn't even see it if his level didn't reach that level. However, this high-level terror form wasn't something every terror-transformed creature could achieve. Up to now, the terror-transformed creatures that Zhou couldn't see at all were Demonic Neonate and Ant City's Guardian. It was hard to say who was stronger between Demonic Neonate and Ant City's Guardian, but Zhou's strength was too inferior. Demonic Neonate wasn't a protection-type companion beast, so if Ant City's Guardian chose to attack Zhou, it was impossible for Demonic Neonate to constantly protect him. As long as Zhou was killed, the game would be over. Ant City's Guardian didn't need to fight Demonic Neonate. Her growth speed is really too fast. I wonder when she obtained the Terror Transformation ability. Zhou was somewhat depressed. He had cleared quite a number of dungeons he had downloaded, but he hadn't been able to clear this dungeon that had existed from the beginning. From the looks of it, it would still take some time. He didn't try again. He couldn't even see it, so he had no right to fight Ant City's Guardian. Actually, if Truth Listener uses all its strength, I can still sense a little spatial fluctuation. However, that level isn't enough to support a battle. Zhouwen felt that he had to advance to the mythical stage to see demonic neonates terraform. Mythical. I'm only one step away from advancing to the mythical stage. How can Glimmer advance to a perfect body? Do I really have to teleport to another planet? However, I don't have the ability to survive in space since I haven't reached the mythical stage. There's no way for me to return. If I were to teleport again in a month, I would have long died. After some thought, Zhouwen only had one solution. He used the new Era Life Soul's positioning teleportation ability to first locate Earth before using Glimmer to teleport out. Then, he used the new Era Life Soul's positioning teleportation ability to return. The only uncertainty was that he didn't know if New Era's positioning teleportation ability could perform interstellar teleportation. If it couldn't, he would be dead in space. After some hesitation, Zhouwen didn't dare continue. He planned on returning and thinking of a way to obtain some space capsules and spacesuit. After teleporting to other planets, even if he couldn't teleport back, he could still last a month there until the Glimmer Life Soul's planetary teleportation function recovered. Finally, it was Saturday night. Gaiman got Lance to find Zhouwen. Everyone who was preparing to enter the Maze of Lies had already gathered in front of the door. Gaiman would personally lead the team this time. Among the younger generation, only Lance would follow. The others were middle-aged and elderly. Basically, people who could enter the maze had at least one mythical companion beast. Wang Lu was considered a very unique existence here. No one knew how strong she was, nor did anyone care. As long as she could defeat the Destiny Twin Witches at the draw, it was enough. "Do you want me to accompany you in?" Li Xian said with a smile. "There's no need. Take care of your..." Zhouwen put Yer down and stroked her head. "I'll be back soon. Wait here." "Zhouwen, are you done?" Gamar came over and asked. Although he was somewhat displeased that Zhouwen wasn't participating in the training, he knew that as a secretary, he couldn't show his emotions. Therefore, his attitude remained very good. Zhouwen nodded slightly and came in front of Gaiman. "Mr. Gaiman, there's something I need to confirm in advance. Will you listen to me for this operation?" Gaiman frowned slightly. Gamar hurriedly said, "The situation in dimensional zones is ever-changing. There are many unexpected situations that require last-minute responses. If there's time to discuss, your opinion will naturally be the main priority." Gamar's words were considered respectful, but the meaning behind his words was that everyone could adapt to the situation when the time came. "Mr. Gaiman, is this your intention?" Zhouwen asked Gaiman. Gaiman pondered for a moment and said, "You haven't really entered Sunday's Maze of Lies. There are many things you might not know. The information you have given me is sufficiently detailed. I don't need to go personally to know what's going on in the Maze of Lies." Seeing that Gaiman wasn't that certain, Zhouwen said, "I have an agreement with your family. I definitely have to go to the maze, but if I don't have 100% authority, I wish to enter the maze alone. If you're worried, you can let Lance enter with me. Otherwise, I refuse to participate in this operation." The moment that was said, it wasn't just the local tyrants. Even the experts from the Ultimate Family Clan couldn't hold it in. Zhouwen made it sound as though they were a burden. "Isn't your request a little too much?" Gaiman said as he stared at Zhouwen. "The final decision. This is also the content of the previous agreement. If you can't abide by the agreement, I won't take the risk of entering the dimensional zone," Zhouwen said very seriously. "Mr. Gaiman, since he's afraid to go, why are you forcing him? He's just a young man who doesn't know his limits. There's no need to bother with him. Mr. Gaiman, let's go in. It's fine if he doesn't want to go. Don't tell me we can't do anything without him?" The local tyrants were already dissatisfied with Zhouwen. Now they were even more dissatisfied. However, Gaiman was somewhat stumped. This was because Fraud had once again exhorted that Zhouwen had to be present for this operation to succeed. He had to bring Zhouwen in. "All right, since it's an agreement, We'll do as you wish. You have the final decision. Gaiman pondered for a long time before finally compromising. Everyone was somewhat displeased with Gaiman's compromise, but since it was Gaiman's decision, there was nothing they could do. Chapter 10:20. Although Gaiman had agreed, Zhou didn't relax because of this. The human heart was unfathomable. No one knew what would happen after entering. However, after hearing Fraud's intelligence, Zhou had already done what needed to be done in exchange. If they courted death themselves, Zhou couldn't stop them. After entering the maze, follow me. Listen to everything I say. Don't listen to what others say. Don't believe them, Zhou whispered to Wang Lu. All right. Wang Lu nodded slightly. Everyone arrived in front of the maze and answered the questions according to the order they had arranged. This was because some questions couldn't be answered. They could only give up when encountering such questions. Then, they wouldn't be able to return for a day to answer the questions and enter the maze. Therefore, the Ultimate Family Clan had prepared so many people just in case. Even if a portion of them couldn't enter, it wouldn't hinder their plans. In the team, there were 3 indispensable people: Zhou, Wang Lu, and Gaiman. Zhou glanced at the number of people. There were nearly 30 of them. More than half of the experts in the North District with mythical companion beasts were here. However, if they were to answer one by one, it would probably take 30 minutes for everyone to gather together. This was too wasteful. Mr. Gaiman, must so many people enter? Zhou asked Gaiman. The maze is too dangerous. It's easier to deal with any accidents with more people, Gaiman said. All right then. Where's Wang Lu's position? Zhou asked. Because if Wang Lu doesn't enter, no one will be able to pass the Destiny Witch's test. Therefore, she has to enter first. We will get the 2 families' veterans to receive her to prevent any accidents from happening inside, Gaiman said. Change it. Let Wang Lu be the last to enter, Zhou said. That's not good, right? If she can't enter last, wouldn't our previous work have been in vain? Gamar said. I remember that I'm the one in charge here. If I say she's the last, she's the last. Is there a problem? Zhou said to Gamar. Gamar's expression changed slightly as he was speechless. All he could do was look at Gaiman. With Wang Lu's abilities, it's unlikely she can't enter. Let her be the last to enter, Gaiman said, unwilling to clash with Zhou over such a trivial matter. With Gaiman's orders, Gamar changed the order. Everyone imagined that Zhou had taken a fancy to the young and beautiful Wang Lu and wanted to show off in front of her. They didn't say anything but felt some contempt. Zhou was still thinking of women at such a time. He was ultimately a young man. What they didn't know was that half an hour later meant that they would only be safe for half an hour. If something happened inside and they couldn't come out in time as planned, it might save their lives. Everyone answered the questions one by one and entered the maze. Many people could only give up because they encountered a dead-end question. Only a little more than half of them were able to enter. Zhou was originally second to last, but after some thought, he got Wang Lu to answer the question first. It wasn't that Zhou wanted to be safer, but he wanted to know what kind of problems a person like Wang Lu would encounter. When Wang Lu walked to the door, a question immediately appeared. Is 1 + 1 equal to 2? Zhou was immediately rendered speechless. There was actually such a question. Without a doubt, Wang Lu successfully entered. Zhou went up to answer the question again and saw the question on the door. Is human nature evil or good? My life doesn't need simple beauty. Zhou decisively activated the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder and randomly chose one. He also successfully entered the maze of lies on Sunday. Including Zhou and Wang Lu, a total of 17 people entered. Gaiman and Gamar were among them. Lance had also successfully entered. Gaiman had already arranged for his men to take action the moment Zhou entered. Although he didn't know that there was a time limit here, he knew that he couldn't waste time here. Soon, the group arrived in front of the merry-go-round. There was really a devil clown there. Upon seeing everyone, the 6 magic balls in his hand shot out. Gaiman summoned an ice nightmare. The ice aura spewed out froze the 6 magic balls, preventing them from bouncing again. The devil clown vanished with stealth. One of them summoned a bat-like mythical companion beast. The bat emitted a sound wave that caused the stealthed clown to appear, preventing it from maintaining its stealth state. Everyone joined forces to defeat the enemy and successfully killed the troublesome devil clown. No one was injured at all. Zhou didn't find it strange. This was because they had already sacrificed quite a number of people to figure out the devil clown's information. If they still couldn't kill it, they would really be letting down the people who had died in the maze of lies over the years. It's the same as our previous training. Maintain this state and continue advancing. Gaiman led the team in the direction of Witch Castle. While Zhou was in-game, he had actually encountered a few dimensional creatures. However, their range of activity wasn't in this area. Logically speaking, after killing the devil clown, they should be able to reach Witch Castle without any obstructions. However, not long after they walked, they suddenly saw a 3-headed white wolf with a pair of wings on its back fly through the air. One of the wolf heads spewed out flames, another spewed out icy mist, and the middle wolf head unleashed a soundwave attack. It's a 3-headed wolf. Don't panic. Follow the training plan, Gaiman continued commanding. Although the 3-headed wolf was powerful, it was difficult for 3 of them to fight more than 10 mythical companion beasts. They were quickly killed. Although the mythical creatures here are powerful, with mythical companion beasts like us around, it's easy to enter Witch Castle. As a local bigshot spoke, he deliberately glanced at Zhou. It was as though he was saying that even without Zhou, they could always do it. Zhou was redundant. Zhou sincerely hoped that he was redundant. Being safe was better than anything else. He wanted to quickly complete the mission and return. However, just as the person finished speaking, he suddenly saw the 3-headed wolf's corpse explode, splattering blood and flesh everywhere. Quite a few of them were stained with blood. Just at this moment, they suddenly heard strange cries coming from all directions. They sounded like wailing, like demons, like ghosts. Vaguely, they could see that there were some creatures in the distance that were approaching them. This seems a little different from in-game. Zhou couldn't help but frown, but he had already guessed what creature it was. Sogu. Chapter 10:21. It was very difficult to communicate in the maze of lies because the silencer had used a silencing spell on most people. Usually, they could communicate through handwritten text, but in an emergency, they could only rely on their reactions. Retreat first. Gaiman didn't have the time to write too many words. He only wrote 3 words for everyone to see before retreating in the direction of the door. Clearly, Gaiman and company didn't know what was about to appear. In the past, they had only explored the parts related to Witch Castle. They hadn't completely explored the entire maze of lies, nor had they seen all the dimensional creatures. However, Zhou had explored the entire maze and had seen most of the dimensional creatures inside. Although he had never seen the 3-headed wolf's corpse self-destruct, he could roughly guess the dimensional creatures that were about to arrive from the sound. If that thing really comes, those who are stained with the 3-headed wolf's blood probably won't have it easy. Zhou swept his gaze and quickly determined who the people stained with the 3-headed wolf's blood were. Wang Lu wasn't stained with wolf blood when she was beside Zhou. Only when she saw that Lance wasn't stained with wolf blood did she feel relieved. However, there were a total of 17 people, and 9 of them were stained with wolf blood. Zhou couldn't help but frown slightly. The 3-headed wolf's self-destruction was really timely. It happened to self-destruct in the middle of everyone. Could it be that it was here to send itself to its death? Upon thinking of this possibility, Zhou was somewhat alarmed. If the 3-headed wolf was really here to send itself to its death, the maze of lies in reality was much more terrifying than in-game. The dimensional creatures in-game were in their respective territories. They would only appear when they were triggered. In reality, the three-headed wolf had run over and infected so many people with its wolf blood. This was to pave the way for another dimensional creature to appear. When everyone retreated to the door, they set up a formation with their backs to the exit. The companion beasts were also prepared for battle as they looked in the direction of the strange sound. Soon, everyone saw blood-colored puppets appear everywhere. They looked like humans and were very well made. They were even wearing clothes. However, at their joints, there were thin threads that extended into the distance. It's indeed a devil puppeteer. When Zhou saw the puppets, he knew that he had guessed correctly. However, in the game, the devil puppeteer was in the puppet gallery and wouldn't come out on his own. Now, he had actually run out, and those people were already stained with the three-headed wolf's blood, which just happened to match one of the demon puppeteer's skills. In a while, those people who were stained with the wolf's blood would all become puppets. Of course, this was only his guess. If the devil puppeteer had done something to the three-headed wolf in advance, then the blood could be used by him. If he hadn't done anything in advance, the blood wouldn't have any effect. Gaiman and company ordered their companion beasts to attack the puppet, but in the next second, someone's expression turned extremely horrified. Strange threads appeared on the bodies of those who were stained with the wolf's blood. Those threads were like puppets, extending into the depths of the maze. The people and companion beasts that had thin threads on their bodies were no longer under their control. They seemed to be controlled by the threads as they pounced at their companions. Such an unforeseen event exceeded everyone's expectations. For a moment, chaos ensued. Before the Destiny Witches could even see them, their own people had already started fighting. The puppets also rushed forward to join the battle, and the scene became extremely chaotic. Gaiman wanted to sever the thin threads on those people to see if he could save them. Unfortunately, their weapons slashed down on the thin thread. The thin threads were like flowing water. The weapons slashed over, but the thin threads didn't break. Zhou had long expected such an outcome. He pulled Wang Lu back a distance and waited for the devil puppeteer to appear. It was useless to kill these puppets. The puppeteer had almost countless puppets, so it was useless to exhaust them. He had to wait for the puppeteer to appear and kill him. Gaiman and company clearly realized the problem. They also wanted to find the dimensional creature controlling the puppet. Some even rushed over along the threads. From Zhou point of view, these were all futile actions. The puppeteer was like demonic neonate. They were both very good at hiding themselves and liked to kill in secret. It was impossible to find him by following the threads. It would only put them in danger. Indeed, after the person rushed over with his companion beasts, there was soon no sound. He was nowhere to be seen, and his corpse was nowhere to be seen. "Let's rush over together." Gaiman wrote a few words before wanting to follow the threads on the puppet. The puppets died and came back to life. It was useless to kill them a few more times. They had to kill the person controlling the puppet. "You're not allowed to go over," Zhou wrote on the cardboard. The first time he encountered the puppeteer, he had suffered a huge loss. He thought that he could find the puppeteer by following the threads, but what awaited him was a death trap. "If we don't go over, we'll die." "We can only go over," Gaiman quickly wrote. "According to the agreement, I have the final say. All of you stay here. No one is allowed to go over." Zhou quickly wrote a line. "Give me a reason." Gaiman stared at Zhou and wrote, "I think there's a chance of survival by staying here." "Going over will only lead to death," Zhou wrote. "Staying here will only lead to death. Mr. Gaiman, ignore him. Let's rush over together and capture the fellow who controlled old Lu and company." A person wrote a line before rushing towards the other end of the thread. Zhou had no need to stop others if they wanted to die. After all, the lives of these people had nothing to do with him. The others were also eager to give it a try. Clearly, they felt that if this continued, They wouldn't have a chance of leaving alive unless they killed all the people and puppets who were being controlled. Give Zhou a chance. As Lance controlled his companion beasts to deal with the puppets, he rushed over and raised the token in his hand. As communication wasn't convenient, many people wanted to say something, but they didn't have the time to write in battle. Gaiman looked at the spot where the person had gone and saw that he had vanished silently like the previous person. Finally, he gritted his teeth and ordered everyone to continue resisting the puppets' attacks. He gave up on the idea of following the thread. However, their situation worsened. This was because 9 people were being controlled. When they fought the 9 people, it wasn't easy for them to kill them. This resulted in them being in a very passive state. Furthermore, a large number of puppets rushed over, making it extremely difficult for them to deal with them. Chapter 10:22. Gradually, even Gaiman regretted it. Now, they couldn't retreat or advance. They were trapped here by the puppets, and they didn't even have the chance to rush over along the thin thread. Someone had already been injured. Although it didn't look serious, this was a very bad sign. Some people had no choice but to be ruthless against their companions who were controlled like puppets because they couldn't take care of both. If they didn't do so, they would be killed. However, killing one's companions to save one's life wasn't a good thing for anyone. Therefore, they couldn't help but push the blame to Zhou as they glared at him angrily from time to time. If he could speak, Zhou would probably drown in their spit. However, Zhou didn't care about their expressions at all. He had been using Truth Listener to monitor the surroundings, hoping to discover the puppeteer as soon as possible. It looked as though he had ignored their angry gazes. What was even more infuriating was that Zhou didn't participate in the battle. All he did was watch from the back with Wang Lu, like a young master who had brought a beautiful lady on a vacation. "We didn't invite you here to pick up chicks." If he could speak, Gamar really wanted to reprimand Zhou. Unfortunately, he could only keep his thoughts to himself. The situation was getting worse. A large number of puppets had already surrounded them, preventing him from writing. More and more people were injured. Gaiman was already considering retreating. Otherwise, not only would he not be able to save the 9 people who were controlled as puppets, but they would also die here. However, he didn't do anything when he entered. He had sacrificed 9 people just like that. He didn't know how to explain himself when he left. In fact, many people already had the intention to retreat. The current situation didn't seem to allow them to continue. Suddenly, Zhou, who had been at the back and hadn't participated in the battle, moved. Everyone saw him pull out the bamboo blade at his waist and vanish. "Where's Zhou?" Everyone looked around, but they didn't find Zhou. Crack! A dimensional creature in a black robe fell from the bell tower beside them. When it hit the ground, its body had already broken into 2. The puppets also stopped moving when the dimensional creature fell to the ground. The threads on the 9 people who had been controlled fell off and they regained control of their bodies. Crack! Crack! Kacha! The marionettes shattered one after another. Everyone couldn't help but look up and see Zhou standing on the bell tower, sheathing the bamboo blade. To which castle? After Zhou came down, he wrote 3 words on the cardboard. "Everyone is injured. Let's rest for a while?" Gaiman also wrote on the cardboard. In the previous battle, most of the people were injured, especially the 9 people who were controlled. Their injuries were quite serious. This was because when they were controlled, they didn't fear death at all. They fought with their lives on the line, completely disregarding their own bodies. That was why their injuries were so severe. "Those who are injured return. The rest follow me," Zhou wrote. "Our injuries aren't serious. We can continue fighting after recuperating." The big shots who had come from other places had a slightly different impression of Zhou. However, Zhou's words made it seem as though he was treating them as a burden. It made them very displeased. "In such a place, time is life. I have to seize every second. I don't have time to wait." After Zhou wrote those words, he pulled Wang Lu towards which castle. Old Zhao, go back first. We'll be out soon. Gaiman thought for a moment and decided to let them return first. Go ahead. We'll recuperate here before catching up. Or we can pick you up here, Old Zhao wrote. All right. Gaiman thought for a moment before writing, however, you have to be careful. If any dimensional creatures appear again, leave immediately. All right, Old Zhao agreed. Gaiman chased after Zhou with the uninjured Lance, Gamar, and 2 other members of the Ultimate Family clan who were slightly injured. Thankfully, there weren't any accidents along the way. The group successfully entered Witch Castle. Zhou had only seen cartoonish versions of witches in-game. In comparison, he realized that these witches were indeed quite beautiful. They weren't as cute as in-game. Welcome to the House of Destiny. The black and white witches began explaining the rules of the game, just like in the game. Wang Lu, sorry to trouble you. Gaiman looked at Wang Lu and showed her the words on the cardboard. Wang Lu nodded and was about to draw a card when Zhou stopped her. Are you all right? If you aren't 100% confident, you don't have to draw. I have a solution. Zhou wrote a few words on her palm. No problem. Don't worry, Wang Lu replied as she wrote on Zhou's palm. That's good. Zhou felt relieved. Since Wang Lu was so confident, there shouldn't be any problems. Wang Lu walked in front of the white-robed witch and reached out to take a card. She opened it, and it was the mask card. The luck ability is indeed too useful. Zhou couldn't help but feel wistful as he watched the door to the garden behind the twin witches open. We've finally reached this step. Gaiman looked at the space behind the door and felt somewhat nervous as he led the group towards the door. Go back first. Zhou wrote on Wang Lu's palm. Since we're already here, why don't I go in and take a look? Wang Lu wrote. No, you have to leave immediately. It will be troublesome if there's not enough time. Zhou urged her to leave the Maze of Lies immediately. What do you mean by not enough time? Wang Lu asked in puzzlement. I'll explain it to you in the future. Now, you have to leave the Maze of Lies immediately. You absolutely can't stay inside and wait for me, Zhou exhorted again. However, seeing Wang Lu's curious expression, he knew that she definitely wouldn't leave so easily. Zhou pondered for a moment before lifting Wang Lu up. Ignoring her objections, he carried her and quickly headed back the way he came. After running all the way to the entrance of the maze, Zhou threw her out before turning to head for Witch Castle. Damn it! Wang Lu looked hatefully at the maze door in front of her, but she wasn't really angry. Thinking back to how Zhou had carried her out, she couldn't help but laugh. Seeing that old Zhao and company were still inside, Zhou wrote, All of you can leave. There's no need to stay here. Otherwise there will be danger. We're willing to stay. There's no need for you to worry. Old Zhao was very stubborn and refused to leave. Zhou couldn't be bothered to say anything else as he walked towards the garden. I hope Gaiman and company are fine. When Zhou rushed to the garden, Gaiman and company had already entered. They didn't wait for him to return. Chapter 10:23. When Zhou passed through Witch Castle and arrived at the garden, he saw Gaiman and company standing motionless in the garden as though they were possessed. What happened? Zhou was secretly alarmed. Although there were shape-shifting beasts in the garden, with Gaiman and company's abilities, it wasn't easy for the shape-shifting beasts to kill them. It had only taken him about 10 minutes to send Wang Lu back. Zhou didn't believe that Gaiman, Lance, and company had fallen for the shape-shifting beasts' tricks in such a short period of time. Furthermore, Gaiman and company were only standing in the garden. There were no wounds on their bodies, and there were no signs of battle around them. It didn't look like a huge battle had just happened. However, Gaiman and company stood there motionless like stone statues. Zhou looked at the center of the garden, where Gaiman and company were facing. There's no tree. Zhou was immediately alarmed. The rest of the garden looked identical to the one in-game, but there was no tree in the middle. There was a tomb where the tree was originally. In front of the tomb was a tombstone, and on the tombstone was a strange mask. The mask looked like a devil, but it also looked like a clown. It was strange and comical, different from any mask Joanne had seen before. Gaiman, Lance, and company stared intently at the mask on the tombstone. They didn't even blink, as though they weren't breathing. There really is a tomb and a mask. Fraud didn't lie. Joanne sized up the mask as he activated Truth Listener and the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. However, as he looked at it, he realized that he couldn't move his gaze away from the mask. The eye sockets of the mask were like two black holes that seemed to suck away Joanne's soul. No good. Joanne was alarmed. His first reaction was to summon demonic neonate, but he realized that he couldn't even summon his companion beast. It was as though some mysterious force was blocking his thoughts, preventing him from contacting his companion beast. Damn it, what's going on? Joanne couldn't be bothered to be alarmed. He first attempted to switch essence energy art. He could use them, but his body couldn't move. No matter which life soul or life providence he used, his eyes were firmly sucked into the mask and his body couldn't move. It's over. Joanne's heart turned cold. Right now there was really no response from the heavens or the earth. He could do nothing but stand here. The only thing Joanne was glad about was that he had forcefully sent Wang Lu out. Otherwise, she would have died here too. He switched his life soul to the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. The garden had an hour limit. He couldn't move while standing there. If he didn't have the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder after an hour, he would definitely die. Even with the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, he didn't know how long he could live. He did not believe that the mask could only attract people to stand there. It must have other abilities. The mask could even eat people. I can still last for a period of time with the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, but Lance and company don't have the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. If they can't leave this place in an hour, they will probably die immediately. Joanne estimated that there were only about 40 minutes left before the 1-hour time limit in the garden. What should I do? Countless thoughts flashed through Joanne's mind, but he couldn't think of a solution. He couldn't move his body or contact his companion beast. Although he could use essence energy arts, they weren't enough to allow him to escape the strange power of the mask. Time ticked by as cold sweat broke out on Joanne's forehead. This was because the hour was approaching, but he still hadn't thought of a way to save Lance and company. Dong, dong, dong. Suddenly, Joanne heard a strange sound coming from the grave. It was a very dull knocking sound. The sound kept coming. As the Truth Listener earring had been on Joanne's ear in the form of an earring, its ability was still working, allowing Joanne to hear that the sound came from the grave. The soil on the grave was shaking. Then, with a dull sound, the mound of soil was rising, as if something was going to drill out of it. I knew it. Every time I enter a dimensional zone in real life, something will happen. I won't be eaten by a dead person this time, right? Joanne was extremely depressed. He wasn't afraid because there was no such thing as ghosts and gods in this era. Everything was a dimensional creature. Since ghosts and gods were dimensional creatures, what was there to be afraid of? Dong, dong. The sound from the grave continued sounding. Furthermore, it became clearer and clearer. It wasn't as dull as before. Soon, Joanne discovered that a strange chest had appeared from the soil in the grave. It was as though some force was pushing it from below. That's a coffin? The coffins Joanne had seen in the past were all squarish, but this coffin style was somewhat strange. It was hexagonal. Dong, dong. The sound sounded again as the coffin trembled. Now, he was certain that the sound came from inside the coffin. It looked like something was about to rush out of the coffin. Clang. Just as Joanne was thinking, he suddenly heard a loud bang. The lid of the coffin flew up. Then, Joanne saw a hand extend out of the coffin and block the edge of the coffin wall. It was a pale hand with slender fingers, but it was very thin, as though it was malnourished. The fingernails weren't long, but they had a strange jade-like color. They didn't look like normal keratin. Soon, another hand extended out. A pair of hands pressed down on the side of the coffin. It looked very forceful, and even the veins on the back of the hands protruded. Then, Zhou saw a head slowly rise up. Long hair covered his face, making it impossible to see what he looked like. From his figure, he was likely a man. The man stood up from the coffin. His figure was about the same as Zhou. Perhaps he was slightly taller, but not by a few centimeters. Judging from its appearance, it was actually a human being. It's impossible for him to be human. Why would a human sleep in such a place? Just as Zhou was pondering over it, the person pulled back his hair with both hands, revealing his face. The moment he saw the face, Zhou was so surprised that he almost escaped the mask's control. This was because the face looked identical to Lance's. Zhou used Truth Listener to carefully observe his figure and realized that his figure was the same as Lance's. It was as though they were carved from the same mold. However, he was thinner than Lance and looked a little malnourished. It's impossible for him to be Lance. Then, who is he? Zhou was very certain that he wasn't Lance because Lance was standing there in a daze, just like him. Sogu. Chapter 10:24. After the person came out of the grave, he looked no different from a living person. With Truth Listener's ability, it was impossible to tell if he was human. Crack! The tombstone shattered and the mask embedded in the tombstone floated up and floated in front of the man. The man glanced at the mask and muttered to himself, "Is it finally going to begin again?" With that said, he picked up the mask and slowly placed it on his face. The strange mask stuck to his face as though it had fused with his face. It didn't look like he was wearing a mask. Instead, it was as though the mask had grown on his face to begin with. The feeling was extremely strange. After the man put on the mask, Zhou immediately felt his body regain its freedom. It was the same for Lance and company. "I'll ask and you will answer. Now you can speak. The rules here won't kill you for speaking," the masked man said calmly. Who are you?" Lance stared at the masked man and asked. Although he couldn't move previously, he clearly had the ability to observe the masked man's face. He was more puzzled than anyone else why the masked man's appearance was identical to his. "Are you Fraud's descendant?" The masked man didn't answer his question and instead asked. "That's right. We are all Fraud's descendants. Who are you?" Gaiman stared at the masked man and asked. "None of you are. Only he is." The masked man slowly raised his hand and pointed at Lance with his index finger. "What do you mean?" Lance stared intently at the masked man. "Fraud and I had an agreement. He would give me his descendant, and you are his descendant," the masked man said. Although his words were strange, Zhou believed him. This was because Lance shouldn't have come to this operation. Lance had never contracted a mythical companion beast before and had just been injured. Coupled with his special identity, it didn't seem like he should have come here to take the risk. However, Fraud had gotten Lance to participate in this operation. For this, he had even specially contracted a mythical companion beast for him. Zhou originally imagined that Fraud was trying to train Lance and give him more experience. That was why he had gotten him to carry out this mission. From the looks of it, it wasn't that simple. Perhaps the masked man's words were true. "What are you talking about? There was no such thing. We are all Fraud's blood relatives. Even if he really has a deal with you, it shouldn't be Lance." Gaiman shielded Lance behind him, but his expression was somewhat odd. Although Gaiman's words were very firm, he was as doubtful as Zhou. "No, you aren't. The bloodline in your bodies is only the bloodline of a human, Fraud. It's meaningless to me. Only he has the bloodline of a non-human Fraud. It's the body I need," said the masked man. "Nonsense. He's my grandson and I'm Fraud's son. In terms of bloodline, I'm naturally closer to Fraud. Who are you? Why did you fabricate these lies? Gaiman summoned his companion beasts and gestured for Lance and company to retreat, hoping to leave the garden. The bloodline I mentioned might be a little different from what you understand, but it doesn't matter. From the looks of it, Fraud doesn't plan on offering him to me. As the masked man spoke, his gaze shifted to Zhou. From the looks of it, in order to exchange for his bloodline, he has prepared a better body for me. When the masked man first spoke, Zhou had already realized that he might have been scammed by Fraud. Now that he heard the masked man's words, there was no doubt that he had indeed been scammed. Who are you? Lance stared at the masked man and asked again. The masked man answered unhurriedly, I'm not human. I'm a guardian, the guardian of the maze of lies. How is that possible? You are a human. Besides, the guardian of the maze of lies has already been killed. Lance naturally didn't believe him. The mask on the masked man's face looked like a human's face as it revealed an evil expression. I only said that I'm the guardian of the maze of lies, but I didn't say that I'm the current guardian. You're not wrong to say that I'm human. This is because only by combining with a human body can I obtain the possibility of growing in this world. However, it's too troublesome to contract with humans. I still need to take care of those weak humans. I hate trouble, so I chose to fuse with a human body so that everything is in my hands, the masked man said. Zhou immediately understood that this masked man was the opposite of Wang Mingyuan. Wang Mingyuan had used a human body to absorb and fuse with a guardian. As for the masked man, he had used a guardian's body to absorb and fuse with a human. The foundation was the same, but it was reversed. You were the guardian of the previous battle of guardians? Zhou interrupted. Something like that. The masked man continued. Although fusing with a human body allowed me to escape the restrictions on the power of outsiders in this world, it also forced me to face another problem. A human body is different from a guardian's. A guardian's body doesn't age, but a human's body will age and die. I don't want to die, so before I age, I have to change bodies. Therefore, I made an agreement with Fraud. I helped him obtain what he wanted, and in return, he would give me his bloodline as my new body. According to the agreement, you have finally come to me. As he spoke, the masked man's gaze landed on Lance before landing on Zhou. He didn't move any further. Fraud has really put in a lot of effort. Originally, his bloodline was the most suitable for me, but I never expected that there would be such a body among natural humans. I'll accept his painstaking efforts. Go back and tell Fraud that I've accepted this body. The agreement is over. Lance, who was retreating, stopped when he heard that. He stared at the masked man and said, ignoring the fact that I don't believe such a thing, even if it really exists, this matter has nothing to do with others. This is an agreement between you and our family. Don't implicate others. The masked man laughed when he heard that. Are you going to let down Fraud's painstaking efforts? In order to save you, he found so many people and hoped that I could choose another body. This is your only chance of survival. If I don't choose him, you will definitely die. Lance, let's go. Gaiman pulled Lance back. However, Lance suddenly summoned his companion beast and wore his companion beast armor. He threw a punch at the masked man. Then try and see if you can snatch my body. Gaiman was alarmed. It was already too late for him to stop him. All he could do was cooperate with Lance and attack. Gamar and the other two members of the Ultimate Family clan also attacked. Their mythical companion beasts mostly had freezing powers. All sorts of freezing rays blasted at the masked man. Chapter 10:25. However, the freezing beams passed through the masked man's body as though his body was an illusion. They didn't have any effect. It's useless. Your strength is too weak. You don't have the right to touch me. The masked man watched as Lance's fist and body passed through his body. He stood on the spot and continued, If it wasn't for the fact that this body is too old, you wouldn't even have the right to see me." As he spoke, the masked man's gaze focused. Lance, Gaiman, and company immediately returned to their stunned states, unable to move. "On account of Fraud's good work, I'll forgive your rudeness this time, but don't do it again." After the masked man said that, Lance and company immediately regained their freedom. "This is your deal with our family. If you want my body, take mine. Don't implicate others," Lance said. "Lance." Gaiman wanted to pull Lance away, but Lance dodged him. "Are you really willing to let me take your body? Do you know that although your body can continue living, your consciousness will be completely wiped away?" "I don't need your consciousness," the masked man asked Lance with interest. "I'll settle my own matters. I don't need anyone to replace me." "It won't be that easy for you to occupy my body," Lance said calmly. "From the looks of it, humans these days seem to have more backbone than before. Unfortunately, I've already changed my mind. I want his body. Your body is no longer useful to me. I won't change my decision. It's up to you to leave or stay, but his body is mine," the masked man said to Zhou. "Sorry, I didn't know things would turn out like this," Lance said to Zhou. "It's fine. It's not your fault." Zhou shook his head slightly. He was already used to the feeling of falling into a scheme. If a person didn't have any wealth, even if he appeared in front of a bad person, the bad person wouldn't scheme against him because there was nothing to gain from it. However, if a person had huge treasures, no matter how far away they hid, someone would still target them. As the saying went, a man's wealth would land him in trouble. This was probably the principle. As Zhou Wen's abilities became stronger, no matter how much he restrained himself, there would be people targeting him. This was inevitable. Of course, Zhou Wen could accept it, but it didn't mean he would forgive Fraud. "Since my life should have been left here, I will still stay here. Even if I really go to hell, I won't be lonely," Lance said. "I don't care if you want to go to hell, but I haven't lived enough. I still want to live for a few more years." As Zhou Wen spoke, his figure suddenly vanished. He used teleportation and headed for the garden's exit. However, Zhou Wen soon realized that the door to the garden had vanished. There was nothing outside the garden with no way out. "Only those with my permission can leave this place," the masked man said with a smile. "Then, can I leave this place after killing you?" Zhou Wen asked directly. The masked man laughed. "Of course, if you can kill me, you can also leave this place. Unfortunately, even the most powerful human is nothing more than an ant in front of me." "How do you know it won't work if you don't try?" Zhou Wen continued drawing his bamboo blade. "I'll fight with you." Lance leaned over and said. "All right, I'll attack from the top while you attack from the bottom," Zhou Wen said. "Okay." Lance immediately rushed over. Zhou Wen was behind him, but he struck the back of Lance's head, knocking him out. "Take him back. Don't be a hindrance here." Zhou Wen hugged Lance and threw him at Gaiman. Gaiman hurriedly caught Lance and looked at Zhou Wen with a complicated expression. "Our family has let you down. I never expected you. Feel free to tell me if you have any wishes. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely help you complete them." Gaiman didn't know, but if such a matter had happened to anyone else, it was impossible for them to be as carefree as Zhou Wen. He was even thinking of Lance and wanted to send him out. "Don't thank me. I'm a person who distinguishes between gratitude and grudges. This matter has nothing to do with Lance. He doesn't need to die with me, but go back and tell Fraud that I'll definitely take back what he owes me," Zhou Wen said. Gaiman didn't say anything else. He only bowed deeply at Zhou Wen before leaving the garden with Lance. From his point of view, it was impossible for Zhou Wen to leave alive. In front of the godlike invincible masked man, they didn't even have the ability to resist. Only death awaited them. I wonder if demonic neonate is the masked man's match? However, with things having come to this, I can only give it a try. However, it shouldn't be a big problem. I can't even see demonic neonate's terror form, but I can at least see this masked man. Zhou closed his eyes, preventing his gaze from coming into contact with the mask. He hoped to prevent his body from being immobilized. It's useless to close your eyes. The influence of this mask isn't targeted at your eyes, but your soul, the masked man said to Zhou with interest. He looked at Zhou as though he was looking at a new car or a house. He was filled with curiosity, but he didn't treat Zhou as a person. Can I ask you a few questions? Zhou didn't open his eyes as he said after some thought. On account that you are about to contribute your body to me, I can try my best to answer you. The masked man wasn't in a rush to attack as though he was waiting for something. You participated in the previous battle of Guardians, so can you tell me what the Guardians are looking for? Zhou wanted to take the opportunity to probe into some secret. There were so many powerful life forms in the dimension that wanted something from Earth, but up to now, Zhou still didn't know what they wanted. If you were to ask the other Guardians this question, I'm afraid none of them would know even if you asked 99 of them. However, since you asked me, you've asked the right question. I'm the only Guardian among the 100 who knows. The masked man's answer delighted Zhou. What is it? Zhou pressed. I don't know what it is, the masked man answered. The corners of Zhou's eyes twitched as he had the urge to slap him to death. The masked man seemed to appreciate Zhou's expression as he said with a faint smile, Of course I don't know. This is because even the big shots of the dimensional races don't know what they are looking for. However, there's a clue. Not many Guardians know this clue, and I'm one of them. What clue? Zhou pressed. Companion beast, the most powerful companion beast, the masked man said. Chapter 10:26. Companion beast? Aren't dimensional creatures unable to use companion beasts? Why do they need companion beasts? Zhou was puzzled. Who told you that dimensional creatures can't use companion beasts? The masked man curled his lips and said, They just can't use the companion beasts on Earth. In the dimension, there are many powerful companion beasts. They're just a little different from the companion beasts on Earth. Furthermore, they're far stronger than the companion beasts on Earth. Since the companion beasts of the dimension are stronger than the companion beasts on Earth, why are they searching for companion beasts on Earth? Zhou was even more puzzled. This world is very unique. It's so unique that all dimensional creatures can't understand it. The masked man pondered for a moment before continuing. It's impossible to create something out of nothing in any dimension. Even if it's only in theory, it's impossible to do such a thing. However, on Earth, humans have done it. Humans can create something out of nothing? Why don't I know about it? Zhou thought for a moment. Earth didn't have such powerful technology. Yes, every human can do it. The masked man smiled at Zhou. You can do it too. What's that? Zhou still couldn't figure out how he could create something out of nothing. The masked man raised a hand and pressed his head with his finger. It's the imagination of the brain. In all the dimensions, there's no such thing as ghosts and gods. Only Earth has imaginary products like ghosts and gods. Isn't this creating something out of nothing? What's even stranger is that these ghosts and gods and human illusions can actually be found in the dimension. This is a mystery that has yet to be explained. The theory of ghosts and gods originated from humans' fear of nature. It's just that humans have a rich imagination. Perhaps it doesn't mean anything. Or perhaps, when dimensional creatures descended on Earth in the past, humans saw them and treated them as ghosts and gods, resulting in their legends. It's not strange to find corresponding creatures in the dimension, Zhou said. No, that's not the case. In fact, you don't know that, outside this world, there's an area between the dimension and this world. That area can nurture many dimensional creatures. The dimensional creatures in Earth's dimensional zones come from there, not from the dimension. The masked man continued, What's even stranger is that some powerful dimensional creatures once spent a lot of energy and effort to study the region where dimensional creatures were born. they discovered something very strange. What strange thing? Zhou obviously knew of such a place. Not only did he know of it, but he had also been there. The dimensional creatures born there are highly overlapping with the creatures you humans have imagined. Furthermore, there were originally no dimensional creatures there. After you humans used your imagination to create them, there were also corresponding dimensional creatures born there. How can you be sure that dimensional creatures were born after humans used their imagination to create them? Perhaps humans have long imagined it, but you just haven't discovered it in the past. Zhou attempted to analyze. This isn't difficult to prove. This is because 1,000 years ago, humans didn't have firearms, and the dimensional creatures born in that area wouldn't have firearms either. When pistols appeared among you humans, some dimensional creatures were actually born with weapons like pistols. Although there are very few of them and they're very rare, this is a fact. Is that so? Zhou was somewhat surprised. I don't know if there are many such things in modern times, but before I fell asleep, such a situation had indeed happened. The masked man continued, there are still many strange things about Earth. For example, even powerful existences at the apocalypse stage will have their strength weakened to the level of ordinary mythical creatures after they descend into this world. Another example is that only the human body can break through to the level above the terror grade in this world. These are all very unscientific. In theory, this world is a low-level world compared to the dimension. Low-level creatures can't restrict high-level creatures. Even if they can't withstand the descent of high-level creatures, they will only be destroyed by high-level powers and not restrict high-level creatures. However, up until I fell asleep, no expert has been able to destroy the rules of this world. What does this mean? It means that Earth isn't a low-level world? Is it possible that it's higher than the dimension? Zhou said. That's right. Those dimensional experts have the same considerations. However, if this world is a high-level world, there will definitely be high-level life forms. However, there are no such life forms on Earth. Apart from Earth, there are no life forms on the other planet. Therefore, those big shots want to find the answer. When the masked man said that, he revealed a strange smile. The smile sent a chill down Zhou spine as he had an ominous feeling. Have they found the answer? Zhou asked nervously. More or less. According to their speculations, this world might very well have an extremely powerful companion beast born. As for you humans and the other dimensional creatures, they are just companion creatures of that companion beast, the masked man said with a smile. Zhou was somewhat puzzled when he heard that. He frowned and asked, why would a companion beast be born and not a dimensional creature? I don't know about that. You have to ask those dimensional bigwigs. This is what they speculated. Furthermore, they speculate that once that companion beast is born, this world will be destroyed, the masked man continued. Why? Zhou was even more puzzled. I don't know either because I only heard the news and don't know the process of their deduction. However, this matter is already the consensus of the various races in the dimension. They are vying for control of this place to find that companion beast and take it for themselves. Once that companion beast is found, this world will be doomed. The masked man looked up at the sky and said, Time's up. It's time for you to set off. I hope you have a good time before you die. After all, I don't wish for this body to have any unpleasant memories after using your body. What time's up? Zhou asked the masked man. The time of death. The masked man didn't look at Zhou. He continued looking up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, waiting for the moment Zhou died. However, as time passed, Zhou stood there without any changes. He didn't show any signs of dying. As for the masked man, his neck seemed to ache as his expression stiffened. Chapter 10:27. Zhou knew what the masked man meant by that time was up. He had already been in the garden for an hour. Under normal circumstances, He should have been killed by the 1-hour time limit in the garden. Although Zhou didn't know how he would die in reality, he believed that the masked man only wanted his body. A complete corpse was the most suitable. Unfortunately, Zhou had the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder. The time limit here couldn't kill him. The masked man looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle. It was very handsome, but after a while, he couldn't maintain it. You actually have the ability to restrain taboo powers. How surprising. This is a very rare stat. I'm becoming more and more satisfied with your body, the masked man said. Thank you for acknowledging my body, but I'm sorry. I also think this body isn't bad. I have no intention of giving it up. As Zhou spoke, he suddenly summoned the invisibility cloak and wore it. At the same time, he released Ice Maiden from the Chaos Bead. Demonic Neonate was also summoned by Zhou. He carried her in his arms and quickly retreated. As Zhou had to maintain the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder state to prevent himself from being killed by the taboo powers here, he couldn't use teleportation. Ice Maiden had been trapped in the Chaos Bead by Zhou for several days. She was already gritting her teeth in hatred. Now that she was suddenly released, she immediately felt a strange force descend on her, suppressing her body and strength. With a sweep of her gaze, Ice Maiden immediately understood something. She summoned the Ice Castle and used its power to protect her, preventing her from having her Terragrade strength directly reduced by Earth's power. The Ice Castle landed and immediately smashed the garden into smithereens. When the masked man saw Zhou suddenly vanish, Ice Maiden and the Ice Castle instantly appear and smash the garden into smithereens. He imagined that Ice Maiden was a helper summoned by Zhou. The masked man's eyes turned cold. The eye sockets of the mask seemed to have a strange magic power that attracted Ice Maiden's soul. Ice Maiden's gaze involuntarily looked at the masked man's eyes. However, she knew that this wasn't her own will. Ice Maiden was alarmed as well. She imagined that the masked man had been hired by Zhou to kill her, so she immediately entered a terror state. Her entire body turned into an ice crystal as a terrifying cold wave emitted from her body. Instantly, the entire garden turned into an ice kingdom, freezing the masked man in ice. How dare you flaunt ice elemental terror powers in front of me? The masked man's cold voice came from the ice block. Cracks appeared on the ice block and it quickly shattered. The next moment, the masked man's figure disappeared. The Ice Maiden immediately raised an ice barrier to protect her body. As for terrifying invisible blades, they crisscrossed and slashed at the ice barrier, quickly shattering it. As for the masked man's mask, it kept appearing in her mind, making her want to look at the mask. The Ice Maiden was alarmed. The masked man's terrifying strength exceeded her expectations. She never expected Zhou to find such a terrifying person to deal with her. Without any hesitation, the Ice Maiden moved and took out the heaven-shrouding bell from the ice castle. She held it in her hand and shook it violently. The masked man was shaken by the sound of the heaven-shrouding bell and revealed himself. He even staggered a few steps, and a grave expression appeared on his face. A strange gray light suffused the mask, making his face look even more ferocious. Zhou couldn't rush out of the garden and could only hide from afar. However, the invisibility cloak only lasted 3 minutes. Once 3 minutes passed, the masked man and Ice Maiden would be able to find him. Little Neonate, find an opportunity and kill that masked fellow first. Zhou communicated with Demonic Neonate with his mind. Demonic Neonate remained motionless in his arms. It looked like she felt that the masked man wasn't easy to deal with and was waiting for an opportunity. The Ice Maiden and the masked man fought outside. The heaven-shrouding bell and the mask erupted with strange powers. All Zhou saw was dazzling light flashing, preventing him from seeing their battle clearly. This situation was similar to the situation after Zhou entered the dimension. He could only use Truth Listener's ability to vaguely hear the battle situation. The heaven-shrouding bell was very powerful, but the Ice Maiden's strength seemed insufficient. After shaking the heaven-shrouding bell twice, she failed to kill the masked man. Her strength began to weaken. As for the masked man's strength, it didn't show any signs of weakening. Is the masked man that strong? Zhou was alarmed. He originally imagined that the Ice Maiden was a dimensional creature after all, so she should be strong enough. He never expected that she couldn't suppress the masked man with the heaven-shrouding bell. Although the heaven-shrouding bell is very strong, you are too weak. You can't truly unleash its might. Give it to me and I can spare your life. The masked man actually had the intention of snatching the heaven-shrouding bell. The gray light on the mask intensified as his eye sockets seemed to have endless abysses. The Ice Maiden's mind was gradually attracted by it. She couldn't resist the urge to look at the mask. The Ice Maiden clearly could tell that the masked man had the bloodline of a human and a guardian. She said coldly, "How can a bastard have designs on the heaven-shrouding bell? You are an ice demon. You might not necessarily have a noble bloodline. At the very least, my strength is above yours. If I want you to live, you will live. If I want you to die, you will die." The masked man moved like a phantom in the world of ice and snow. When the Ice Maiden's frost power struck him, it only hit an illusion. The Ice Maiden's eyes became less and less determined. "Hand over the heaven-shrouding bell now, and you still have a chance of survival." The masked man's figure appeared on the ice as though he had appeared in a mirror. The Ice Maiden's gaze began to uncontrollably look at the masked man's figure on the ice as the frost power began to weaken. Ice Maiden doesn't seem to be able to hold on any longer. Zhou couldn't help but worry when he saw that demonic neonate hadn't taken action. This was because the 3 minutes of invisibility were almost up. At that moment, the ice glow on the Ice Maiden's body erupted as an ice crystal crown formed on her head. Her body became increasingly transparent and was almost invisible. At the same time, the Ice Maiden shook the heaven-shrouding bell in her hand. Ice Demon King's bloodline? The masked man revealed a look of surprise. Just as he finished speaking, everything in the garden was shattered by the power of the heaven-shrouding bell. The masked man, who bore the brunt of the attack, slid backward in the garden before slamming into the garden's wall. He collapsed the wall and was buried inside. After this strike, the Ice Maiden's body immediately entered a weakened state. She couldn't maintain her terrifying state and returned to her normal state. However, there was no joy on the Ice Maiden's face. In the collapsed wall, the masked man slowly stood up. Chapter 10:28. The masked man's face was intact, but his clothes were tattered, making him look like a beggar. However, from the damaged parts of his clothes, one could see that his skin was crystalline like jade. There were some strange red spots that quickly disappeared. "From the looks of it, my body is really old. If I were at my peak, such strength wouldn't even be able to damage my clothes. Now I'm actually injured. The human body is indeed too weak." The masked man walked out step by step. The mask on his face seemed to be enveloped by a mysterious fog as it emitted an endless terrifying aura. He was like a devil that had walked out of hell. Even the Ice Maiden's expression changed. "You have an S-class terror form?" The Ice Maiden stared at the masked man and asked through gritted teeth. "As expected of the Ice Demon King's descendant. You have some good eyesight. If it wasn't for my body being too old, your strength wouldn't even be able to injure me," the masked man said indifferently, but he still walked towards the Ice Maiden. The masked man said indifferently, but he still walked towards the Ice Maiden. The closer he was to her, the more she couldn't take her eyes off the mask. "Ice Maiden, give me the heaven-shrouding bell." Zhou suddenly appeared not far from the Ice Maiden. The 3 minutes of invisibility had passed, and he could no longer hide his body. When the Ice Maiden heard Zhou's voice, the hatred in her heart exceeded the mask's influence on her. She subconsciously turned her head to look at Zhou as she raised the heaven-shrouding bell in her hand. Her actions showed that she wanted to use the heaven-shrouding bell to deal with Zhou, but in the masked man's eyes, it was as though she was really going to obediently give the heaven-shrouding bell to Zhou. The masked man instantly arrived in front of the Ice Maiden and extended his hand to grab the heaven-shrouding bell. Without giving the Ice Maiden a chance to react, he had already grabbed the heaven-shrouding bell. The Ice Maiden wanted to resist, but her strength was ultimately inferior to the masked man's. The masked man snatched the heaven-shrouding bell away. At the instant the masked man succeeded, his expression suddenly changed drastically. Demonic Neonate, who was in her terror form, appeared above the masked man's head with a demonic sword in hand. The demonic sword slashed at the mask. Crack! The mask was sliced apart by the demonic sword, leaving a hole in the middle. The masked man spat out a mouthful of blood as his body flew backward. The heaven-shrouding bell he had just snatched was snatched back by demonic Neonate. The demonic infant held the heaven-shrouding bell in one hand and the demonic sword in the other as she charged at the masked man. Zhou couldn't see her figure at all, but he could see that the mask on the masked man's face had been slashed open. It looked like it was about to shatter. Ka-cha! The mask finally could not withstand the terrifying destructive force and shattered into pieces. The masked man's face, which was extremely similar to Lance's, was revealed once again. However, his face was completely drained of blood, and he was coughing up blood. His body was rapidly aging, and in the blink of an eye, he went from looking like a young man to looking like a middle-aged man. More and more wrinkles appeared on his body, and before long, he looked like an old man. Companion beast. Terrifying companion beast. How is this possible? The masked man's body slammed into the wall, creating a hole in it. His body was trapped inside, but his eyes looked in disbelief at demonic Neonate who had stabbed a sword into his glabella. It was as though he had seen a ghost. From the looks of it, you won't be able to use my body. Do you have anything to say before you die? If you have any unfulfilled wishes and it's not too troublesome, I'll help you, Zhou said as he looked at the masked man from afar. Although the masked man's mask had been shattered and the demonic sword had stabbed into his skull, he didn't immediately die. Zhou didn't dare approach him to prevent himself from suffering a backlash. The masked man didn't move, but Ice Maiden suddenly moved. With a terrifying ice beam, she was about to hit Zhou. However, just as she moved, a behemoth rushed out from the calabash in Zhou's hand. 7 strange dragon-like tentacles spewed out white liquid that blocked Ice Maiden's ice beam. At the same time, it wrapped around her body. Another terror grade. Ice Maiden was already speechless from shock. She already understood that she had fallen for Zhou's evil trick and helped him as a fighter. However, while demonic Neonate was dealing with the masked man, she originally believed that it wouldn't be difficult for her to kill Zhou with all her remaining strength. However, she never expected Zhou to have a terror-grade creature. Originally, the 7 Seas Dragon King wasn't Ice Maiden's match. Furthermore, the ice element restrained the 7 Seas Dragon King. However, Ice Maiden had expended too much of her strength. She probably had less than 30% of her combat strength left. How could she be a match for the 7 Seas Dragon King? Is this really Earth? Ice Maiden couldn't believe that a human would have a terror-grade companion beast. Furthermore, he had a terror-grade creature loyal to him. This was unimaginable. Seeing that Ice Maiden was also restrained, her body was wrapped around the 7 Seas Dragon King's tentacles and covered in white liquid, preventing her from escaping. Zhou finally heaved a sigh of relief. The masked man suddenly laughed strangely. As he laughed, he said crazily, "Interesting, this is really interesting. A mere human actually has a terror-grade companion beast, and can even order a terror creature to do things. This is really interesting. Only a body like this is worthy of me, the bizarre god. Your body is mine. Are you dreaming?" As Zhou spoke, he ordered demonic Neonate inwardly to kill the masked man as soon as possible. Demonic Neonate mercilessly pulled out the demonic sword as the blood and brain matter in the masked man's head spewed out. Without any hesitation, Demonic Neonate brandished her sword again and split open Bizarre God's head. As for Grim Demon in the demonic sword, it rushed out and excitedly opened its mouth to swallow Bizarre God's corpse. With a few bites, it swallowed everything. After devouring Bizarre God's corpse, the demonic aura on Grim Demon's body surged. It looked like it was about to evolve. Demonic Neonate waved her hand and Grim Demon returned to the demonic sword. The demonic sword automatically returned to its scabbard and returned to her hand. That's Guardian. A companion beast's guardian. Ice Maiden was already dumbfounded. She couldn't believe what she had seen today and felt like she was dreaming. An epic human had a terror-grade companion beast, and this companion beast actually had a guardian. What was going on? It was like a fantasy. Even in her dreams, Ice Maiden had never imagined such a thing. This guy, is he really a human? Ice Maiden had already given up struggling as she looked at Zhou in a daze. However, no matter how she looked at him, he was only an epic human. Chapter 1029. Deep underground in Frost City, a white-haired, white-bearded man walked out of an ice cavern. The agreement has finally been rescinded. Frod was so excited that he almost roared at the sky. Although he had obtained what he wanted from the deal with Bizarre God, he had still been tricked in the end. His body had fused with the ice and become an undead iceman. Now that Bizarre God had obtained the body he wanted, the agreement had finally been completed. Frod had finally regained his freedom. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Frod immediately walked out of the ice cavern. The moment he saw the sky and the sun, he narrowed his eyes. The long-awaited sun made him so excited that he almost cried. How many years has it been? How many years has it been? I'm finally back. I, Frod, can finally stand at the peak of the earth again. Frod suppressed the excitement in his heart and muttered to himself with a trembling voice. Father, you. Gaiman couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Frod. Gaiman had rushed back to Frost City with his men to ask Frod about this matter as soon as possible. However, now that he saw Frod return to his human form and walk out of the ice cavern, there was no need to ask any more questions. He knew that the masked man's words weren't wrong. Gaiman, where's Lance? Did he come back? Frod immediately grabbed Gaiman's arm and asked when he saw him. He's back. That masked man chose Zhou. Gaiman said with a complicated expression. He was naturally very happy that Lance wouldn't die, but as the price, Zhou had sacrificed himself. Frod wanted to be happy, but he couldn't. Frod's actions were actually different from his ideals. I knew that fellow would definitely choose Zhou. That's good. That's good. Lance has been saved, and I've regained my freedom. This is a joyous occasion for our family. Prepare some alcohol. I want to drink. Frod became even more excited. Gaiman thought for a moment and sighed. Father, Zhou said that he's a person who distinguishes between gratitude and grudges. He'll come for you. Frod laughed. Come for me? I'm afraid it'll be his next life. He has no idea how terrifying that Bizarre God is. Even the top humans are like ants in front of Bizarre God. Bizarre God only needed a single thought to kill as many people as he wanted. Although Zhou is indeed very strong, he's still far from that level. Or rather, it's a power that humans can't reach. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. Go prepare the wine. It's been so many years since I've tasted wine. Now that I've finally recovered my human body and saved Lance, I have to celebrate today. Frod felt a little elated when he thought of the fragrance of the wine. His saliva kept secreting. After he became an Iceman, he lost his sense of taste and was unable to eat. Furthermore, he was trapped in the ice cave. The only place he could move was the ice cave. Although his relatives would occasionally come to visit him, the feeling was still very unbearable, almost driving him crazy. Fraud was an alcoholic to begin with. After enduring for so many years, he only wanted to drink to his heart's content. As for Zhou, he was no longer in his consideration. After all, Zhou wasn't his descendant. It didn't matter if he died. Gaiman sighed inwardly and didn't say anything else. He went to prepare food and wine for Fraud. After all, it was indeed a good thing for the ultimate family clan that Fraud could come back to life. Zhou, what a pity! Gaiman shook his head inwardly. Under such circumstances, Zhou could still think of saving Lance. Gaiman felt that Lance was lucky to have such a friend. Gaiman ordered someone to prepare the best food and wine for Fraud. At the same time, he arranged for the core members of the family to meet him. As the news of Fraud's revival still needed to be kept a secret, he couldn't tell everyone in the Ultimate Family Clan about Fraud's revival. He only let a few core members know about it. Fraud sat in front of the table and watched as all sorts of roasted meat and fish were served. His gastric juices secreted crazily, almost melting his entire stomach. "Where's the wine? I want the wine. Quickly bring it over," Fraud shouted. "Coming." Gaiman took the liquor he had treasured. "This is the smell. This is the smell. How many years has it been? I can finally drink it again." Fraud took the wine and immediately opened it to take a sniff. He hadn't drunk it yet, but the smell of the wine made him so happy that he was almost drunk. "Where's Lance? Why don't I see him?" Fraud was just about to drink when he suddenly thought of Lance. Lance was the descendant he valued the most. At such a happy occasion, Lance should be present. Lance suffered some minor injuries and is resting. Gaiman didn't mention that Lance refused to leave and wanted to compensate Zhou with his life. It was rare for Fraud to be so happy. Furthermore, Zhou was already dead. Lance should be able to get over it sooner or later. There was no need to make Fraud unhappy at such a time. "Are his injuries serious?" Fraud asked with a frown. "It's fine. He'll be fine after resting for half a day," Gaiman said. "That's good." When Fraud smelled the fragrance of roasted meat and alcohol, he was already drooling. He couldn't wait any longer, so he didn't hesitate any longer. He held the bottle and couldn't wait to pour it out. He wanted to pour it into his mouth. "Today is the day I, Fraud, am reborn." Fraud was overjoyed, but he suddenly felt the bottle in his hand be pulled out of his palm by a huge force. He opened his mouth, but he didn't even taste a drop of alcohol. "Who is it?" Fraud was extremely furious. He slammed his palm on the table and glared over. However, when he looked over, Fraud's eyes widened as his pupils constricted. His body trembled. Gaiman and company turned their heads as well. With this look, Gaiman exclaimed, "Zhou, you aren't dead." Zhou held the bottle in Fraud's hand as he stood in front of the door with a calm expression. "Bizarre God. You are Bizarre God, right? From the looks of it, you have already obtained a new life. Congratulations." Fraud stood up and put on a smile as he bowed at Zhou. He naturally believed that Zhou's body had been occupied by Bizarre God. Only then did Gaiman come to a realization. He carefully sized up Zhou and lamented inwardly. However, Zhou didn't look at the respectful Fraud. He looked at Gaiman and said, "Did you deliver the message I asked you to deliver to Fraud? I've already conveyed all your words to Father. Your previous agreement with him has been completed." Gaiman said. "That's not what I said," Zhou said. "This is what you wanted me to." Gaiman wanted to say something when a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Although even he didn't dare believe such a thing and believed that it was a delusion, he couldn't help but have this thought when he looked at Zhou. Chapter 10:30. Bizarre God, if you have anything to say, you can tell me directly now. There's no need to go through anyone else. Although Fraud felt that Bizarre God was somewhat strange and had some doubts, he never expected that Bizarre God hadn't obtained Zhou's body. The person who had returned was the real Zhou. It wasn't that Fraud wasn't sinister and cunning enough, but that he understood Bizarre God's strength too well. He had long formed the notion that Bizarre God was invincible. It was difficult to reverse the situation instantly. Mr. Gaiman, did you pass on my words to him? Zhou ignored Fraud and continued speaking to Gaiman. When Gaiman heard Zhou's tone, he was increasingly certain of his guess. His voice trembled as he looked at Zhou and said, You are Zhou. Fraud jolted when he heard Gaiman's words. Before this, he had never thought of such a possibility, but Zhou's tone and demeanor seemed to be somewhat different from the Bizarre God he knew. Impossible. How can a human defeat Bizarre God? No matter how many mythical companion beasts he has, it's useless. It's impossible for a human to win. Fraud couldn't accept such a possibility deep down. Who else can I be if not Zhou? Zhou said calmly. The moment that was said, everyone was alarmed. Fraud's body trembled as he looked at Zhou with a strange look. How did you escape? Fraud looked at Zhou in surprise. He naturally refused to believe that Zhou could defeat Bizarre God. He only imagined that Zhou had used some strange ability to luckily escape the maze of lies. However, Zhou continued ignoring Fraud. He looked at Gaiman and continued asking, Did you tell him what I asked you to relay? Yes, Gaiman answered with a strange expression. That's good. Zhou nodded before looking at Fraud and saying, Fraud, since you've already relayed the message, there's no need for me to say anything else. Do you want to end it yourself, or do you want me to do it? Fraud's expression darkened as he stared at Zhou and said, I've indeed let you down on this matter. However, since you escaped, I can give you some compensation and settle some matters. From the looks of it, you want me to take action? Zhou said to Fraud. Zhou, this is the ultimate family clan. There's no benefit in fighting me here. Anyway, you won't suffer any losses. I can give you a mythical companion egg as compensation. This matter will end here. This will benefit both of us, Fraud said indifferently. Zhou pondered for a moment and didn't say a word. Thinking that he was already tempted, Fraud continued, You don't need to pay any price to obtain a mythical chaotic companion and my friendship. This will be of great help to you in the future. Fraud, you sold me and even your bloodline to Bizarre God in order to escape the ice cavern, right? Zhou suddenly interrupted Fraud. Fraud's expression turned a little ugly, but he still said, Even if I don't send him in, Bizarre God will rush out of the maze of lies when the time comes. When the time comes, it will only bring about an even greater disaster. In other words, you used me to exchange for a chance to escape from the ice cavern and regain your freedom? Zhou asked again. What exactly are you trying to say? Fraud was already somewhat impatient. I'm a very fair person. Since you used me to exchange for freedom, I'll take back what belongs to me and send you back into the ice cavern, Zhou said calmly. Who do you think you are? You are only a human, not Bizarre God. Apart from God, no one can defeat me, Fraud. Even the hero king from back then couldn't do so. Fraud found it difficult to control his emotions when he heard the words, ice cavern. He had endured for so many years and finally escaped the ice cavern with great difficulty. He had recovered and become a normal person, but he hadn't even had a sip of alcohol. He definitely wouldn't return to such a place. Fraud knew that Zhou was very strong. From his point of view, Zhou's ability to escape from Bizarre God was a very terrifying ability. However, no matter how strong Zhou was, he was only a human. He ultimately had his limits. With his strength and the ultimate family clan's present heritage, there was no need to be afraid of Zhou. He had even secretly decided that even if he had to pay a price, he would kill Zhou here to eliminate this future threat. Ice Maiden. Zhou had no intention of wasting his breath on Fraud as he called out Ice Maiden's name. At that moment, everyone realized that there was a beautiful young woman standing outside the door. Her expression was as cold as ice, as though someone owed her a lot of money. Yes. Ice Maiden walked through the door and bowed at Zhou. In the maze of lies, Ice Maiden had been forced to sign an unfair contract with Zhou. She could only listen to Zhou's orders. Throw him into the ice, but don't let him die. Don't let him escape either. Furthermore, he has to remain conscious. Can you do that? Zhou said. Yes, Ice Maiden answered with certainty. Then do it. This is what he owes me. Mr. Gaiman, don't you think so? Zhou asked Gaiman. Fraud was already enraged. Zhou had a powerful companion beast, so he didn't dare underestimate him. It would have been fine if Zhou had taken action personally, but now, Zhou had actually gotten a servant to take action. Furthermore, she was such a young woman. This was no longer contempt, but an insult to him. From the looks of it, Fraud, haven't appeared for many years. The world has already forgotten how powerful the hero of ice was. Without waiting for Gaiman to answer, Fraud spoke first. At the same time, a terrifying ice aura erupted from his body. At the same time, he summoned a frost dragon. It prostrated at his feet as its body suffused an extremely terrifying cold aura. The frost dragon was a top-notch ice elemental mythical companion beast. It matched Fraud's ice elemental essence energy perfectly. With the mutual enhancement, their strength greatly increased. Back then, Bizarre God was only able to turn me into an iceman by using a trick to trigger my own power of ice. It wasn't that his power of ice surpassed mine. I want to see how you will seal me in ice again, Fraud said coldly. Ice Maiden wasn't in the mood to speak to Fraud. She glanced at him and shot out an icy beam from her eyes. The icy beam instantly landed on Fraud and the frost dragon. In an instant, Fraud and the frost dragon he was riding were frozen into ice sculptures. The entire process was too fast, so fast that Gaiman and company couldn't react in time. They watched helplessly as Fraud and the frost dragon turned into ice sculptures. Even Fraud himself maintained his proud posture, but his eyes were filled with boundless fear. How is this possible? A top ice elemental mythical creature, the frost dragon, has actually been frozen into an ice sculpture? Gaiman and the other members of the Ultimate Family clan knew how powerful an ice elemental companion beast was. It wasn't surprising that a mythical creature could defeat a frost dragon, but it was terrifying to use the power of ice to freeze a frost dragon. Chapter 1031. Who is that woman? She actually has such a terrifying power of ice. Could she be the legendary goddess of ice? Otherwise, how could she freeze a top ice elemental mythical companion beast like the frost dragon into an ice sculpture with just a glance? Such a woman is actually Zhou Wen's subordinate. Father, what kind of person did you plot against? Gaiman's heart was filled with bitterness. He wanted to save his father, but he was afraid that he would bring destruction to the Ultimate Family clan. Even the frost dragon had been frozen into ice by that woman's casual glance. If he were to anger Zhou, Gaiman really didn't know what the consequences would be. However, he knew very well that not only could he not bear the consequences, but the entire Ultimate Family clan couldn't bear it. The core members of the Ultimate Family clan present were also stunned, momentarily at a loss for what to do. If they had reason, they would still have the courage to fight to the death. But now, they didn't even have a reason to convince themselves to fight to the death. Zhou looked at the frozen Fraud and asked Ice Maiden, "Is it possible for this ice to be melted or shattered? His body has already been frozen by me. Unless his strength is stronger than mine, it's impossible to melt or shatter the ice. However, if that's the case, the person inside will melt or shatter as well. However, as long as the ice isn't destroyed, he won't die," Ice Maiden answered. Very good. Zhou was very satisfied with this answer. On Earth, it was very difficult to find a creature stronger than Ice Maiden. Furthermore, even if he was stronger than Ice Maiden and could shatter the ice, it wouldn't allow Fraud to live. Zhou, on account of Lance and Sadie. Gaiman knew that using force wouldn't work, so he could only persuade Zhou. If it weren't for them, do you think he would be alone in the ice? Zhou looked at Gaiman and interrupted him. Gaiman felt his heart turn cold, but he couldn't say anything else. Zhou poured the wine in the bottle in front of Fraud's ice sculpture and said indifferently, "Continue the rest of your life in the ice. I hope you can live a little longer." With that said, Zhou turned around and left. Ice Maiden followed behind Zhou like a maidservant. The top experts of the Ultimate Family clan were basically here, but no one dared to stop Zhou. They could only watch helplessly as they left. "No. Don't go. Let me out. Please, let me out. Bastard. Kill me if you have the guts. Don't leave, please. Let me out. I haven't even had a sip of alcohol. Let me out." Fraud roared crazily in his heart. In the past, when he turned into an iceman, he could at least move around in the ice cavern. But now, he couldn't even blink his eyes. He was like a statue with a will. It was even more painful than killing Fraud. He would rather die than live like this. "Kill me! Kill me!" Fraud almost went crazy, but no one could hear his thoughts. Gaiman and company gathered all the ice elemental experts in the Ultimate Family clan to remove the ice, but no one could melt even a drop of water. Unbeknownst to them, this was a Terragrade frost power. Unless one also reached the Terragrade, even if they threw ice into the inferno, they wouldn't be able to melt even a drop of water. Zhou didn't meet Lance, Sadie, and company. He directly contacted Wang Lu, Feng Qian, and Li Xian before leaving Frost City. Although Zhou wanted revenge, the other party was ultimately Lance and Sadie's kin. Meeting them under such circumstances would only make both parties awkward, so it was better not to meet them. However, this way, Zhou didn't know that the unconscious Lance was undergoing a strange change. A strange power was surging out of his brain, causing his body to undergo a strange change. Bizarre God had previously said that only Lance was of Fraud's bloodline. This was very contradictory and complicated. There were so many people in the Ultimate Family clan, and in fact, many of them were of Fraud's direct bloodline. Lance wasn't very special among them. Furthermore, he was already in the third generation. Logically speaking, in terms of bloodline purity, a first generation like Gaiman should be closest to Fraud's bloodline. However, the Fraud bloodline that Bizarre God mentioned wasn't calculated in such a manner. In fact, the human body that Bizarre God had fused with belonged to Fraud. However, it wasn't the current Fraud. Instead, Bizarre God had used Fraud's genes and used human genetic technology to create a genetic clone. Although it was a genetic clone, through some of Bizarre God's means, the genetic clone's body was even more perfect and outstanding than Fraud's. However, such a genetic clone still couldn't meet Bizarre God's requirements. Therefore, he had done something to Fraud and left something on him, waiting for the birth of a perfect human body that truly suited him. As for Lance, he was the perfect human body that Bizarre God was waiting for. That was why he looked so similar to Bizarre God. Unfortunately, he had chosen Zhou and abandoned his original plan. However, Lance's body had something left behind by Bizarre God. Zhou and company headed for the East District. Now, Zhou was roughly certain that he probably wouldn't be able to evolve the Glimmer Life Soul if he went to a new place. He planned on returning to buy some necessities for survival in space before teleporting to another planet. This might be the final condition for Glimmer to break through to the perfect stage. After some thought, Zhou felt that it was probably the case. Otherwise, it didn't seem realistic to advance to a perfect body without using Glimmer's interstellar teleportation ability once. After the dimensional storms, aerospace technology had stagnated. Although many satellites had been launched later, they were basically used for information transmission. Humanity's exploration of the universe had long stopped. It had been a long time since humans had been able to land on the Moon, much less Mars. It wasn't easy to obtain space survival equipment. However, with Zhou Wen's current strength, it wasn't difficult to obtain it. After Wang Lu's analysis, Zhou Wen decided to make a trip to the Special Inspection Bureau. It was time to collect some debt. He could also obtain some space equipment as interest. According to Wang Lu, the Special Inspection Bureau had participated in many rocket launches. As satellites were basically unaffected by the anomalies on Earth, they were very useful for observing various parts of Earth. Many pieces of information were obtained using satellites. Chapter 1032. Shinyuchi had been in a good mood recently. Although he had suffered heavy losses recently, the Bureau was still the eyes and ears of the Federation. As the anomalies in various parts of the Federation were getting worse, Shinyuchi used various channels to make up for his losses. However, the main reason why Shinyuchi was in a good mood wasn't because of this. It was because of their recent discovery on the moon. Although the Earth's anomalies were getting worse and worse, and it was disadvantageous to the development of technology, it wasn't completely without benefit. The physique of humans had greatly improved. Coupled with powerful companion beasts, their survivability in space had greatly increased. Some humans with mythical companion beasts, coupled with some space suits and other equipment, could do much more in space than before. However, there were very few people who were willing to develop the space industry. Shinyuchi was one of the more determined ones. He always believed that even in this era, technology would one day occupy an important position. This was especially so for aerospace technology. Shinyuchi had invested quite a bit in this area. More than 2 months ago, humans landed on the moon again and made a major discovery there. There, they discovered a dimensional zone. Furthermore, they discovered a large number of essence crystals in the dimensional zone. Apart from that, they also discovered something very strange. Shinyuchi felt that this discovery might be able to change the current situation of the Federation. As this moon landing operation was mainly promoted by the Bureau, most of the astronauts on the moon were from the Bureau, so this news was quickly blocked by Shinyuchi. This will be the foundation of the Bureau's comeback. I can't afford to make any more mistakes. Shinyuchi thought through the key details again, and confirmed that he hadn't missed anything. Only then did he relax and pour himself a cup of tea. Just as he picked up the teacup and before it touched his lips, someone reported, "Director General, found it." The words were unclear, but Shinyuchi was overjoyed when he heard that. He immediately got up, walked out of the office, and came to the main control room of the moon landing project. "Director General Shin, there was a message from the moon just now. We've finally found it," an old professor said excitedly. Shinyuchi suppressed his excitement and said, "Connect the communications. I want to see that thing." Yes. The staff quickly established a communication connection with the moon. Not long after, they saw an image of a certain spot on the moon appear on the big screen. A few people in spacesuits were in a pit on the moon. In that pit, one could see quite a number of yuan crystal ores. Shinyuchi didn't look at the primordial crystal ores at all. Although the reserves of the primordial crystal ores here weren't lower than the reserves of the Bureau's primordial crystal ores, mining and transporting them was a problem. There was no good solution for the time being. Even if all of them were dug out, it would take some time to transport them all back. In contrast, there was something in the crystal ore that caught Shinyuchi's attention. It was a tree root, the tip of which was as thick as a finger. It twisted and meandered all the way into the crystal ore. The root was as black as ink, but there were no signs of contamination. It was clearly as black as charcoal, but it gave off a feeling of holiness. "Yes, that's it. Dig it out." Shinyuchi suppressed the excitement in his heart and gave the order. "Roger that." After the astronaut received the order, he summoned a companion beast that looked like a rat but was as large as an ox. It continued digging along the route. The companion beast was at the mythical stage. Among all the astronauts there was only one. It was also because of its existence that these discoveries had been made. Only mythical companion beasts could survive in ordinary space environments and work normally. Although some epic creatures could barely survive, it was very difficult for them to work normally. In the beginning, Shin-Yuchi only wanted to know if the moon had undergone any anomalies. If the moon hadn't undergone any anomalies, perhaps he could build a base on it in preparation for the future large-scale breakout of Earth's dimensional zones. If the Federation really couldn't hold on, there was still a way out that wasn't considered a retreat route. With humanity's current physique, as long as they could build a sealed base, it wasn't impossible to live on the moon. Of course, many resources still needed to be obtained from Earth. That was only a final guarantee. In the beginning, they didn't discover any anomalies or dimensional zones on the moon. Later, when they sampled, they discovered a primordial crystal mine. That wasn't much. While digging for samples from the primordial crystal mine, the mythical companion beast dug up something from it. It was a petal that was as white as snow without any impurities. It was as holy as a snowflake. The petal was like a fossil. It was wrapped in the primordial crystal mine, but it didn't petrify or wither. It still maintained its vibrant vitality. To be able to discover a primordial crystal mine on the moon, it wasn't a big deal to discover some plants. However, when the petal wrapped in the primordial crystal mine was taken out, something that shocked everyone happened. As they didn't know what the petal was, they took it out in a sealed environment. Furthermore, it was operated by a companion beast. The companion beast operating it wasn't of a high level. It was just a legendary nature elf. Although nature elves' level wasn't high, they looked similar to humans. They could carry out precise work, so there were many similar companion beasts in typical laboratories. The moment the nature elf touched the petal melted and was absorbed by the nature elf. In just a few hours, the nature elf advanced to the epic stage. This discovery shocked everyone. Shin-Yuchi immediately ordered a lockdown on the news and continued digging in the primordial crystal mine. Indeed, he dug up a few more petals and conducted some experiments. The results of the experiments confirmed that such petals could indeed advance a companion beast. Just one petal could easily advance a legendary to the epic stage. However, as there were too few petals, there was no way to test if petals could advance an epic companion beast to the mythical stage. After some simple research on these petals, he realized that they resembled the petals of an osmanthus flower. However, he didn't know why such petals were on the moon. Shin-Yuchi and many people from the East District immediately thought of a legend in the East District. In that legend there was indeed an osmanthus tree on the moon. In order to confirm if there really was such an osmanthus tree, the mythical companion beast had been working hard to dig over the past few days. Now they had finally gained something. If a petal has such a magical effect, what about a tree? Shin-Yuchi felt his heart beating very fast just thinking about it. Chapter 1033. More and more black roots were dug out. They had already exceeded 2 meters, but there was still no end in sight. This made Shin-Yuchi excited and nervous. He originally imagined that he had dug up a broken root, but from the looks of it, they had really dug up the osmanthus tree. However, there was one thing that caught Shin-Yuchi's attention. When the mythical companion beast was digging, it would occasionally come into contact with the root. However, the roots weren't absorbed like the petals, nor did any strange phenomena happen. Could it be that only the petals have such magical effects? Shin-Yuchi was somewhat worried. If only the petals were effective, how many more petals were there on the osmanthus tree buried underground? However, everything was still unknown. There was no way to determine if the osmanthus tree was useless, nor did he know how many petals there were. All he could do was continue waiting for the result. The professor wanted the astronaut to cut off a portion of the roots and conduct a simple test in the space station, but even the mythical companion beast couldn't damage the roots at all. High-tech cutting equipment was used, but the result was still useless. The hardness of the roots had far exceeded the hardness of known substances. This outcome alarmed everyone, including Shin-Yuchi. After all, it was a mythical companion beast. Even it couldn't injure it at all. What kind of existence was the tree? It was truly shocking. There was no other way but to continue digging. More and more roots were dug out, and they crisscrossed in a complicated manner. It looked like they had really dug up the osmanthus tree. As they dug up quite a number of petals. Apart from a small number being used for experiments and research, most of them were sealed. Seeing more and more petals collected, Shin-Yuchi wished he could fly to the moon and transform into a miner to dig out all the petals. The wealth these petals could bring to the Bureau was immeasurable. Even if those petals couldn't be used to advance an epic creature to the mythical stage, the ability to advance a legendary to the epic stage was enough to create unimaginable wealth. After research, he realized that the more petals a companion beast used, the worse the effects. Different companion beasts obtained different levels of evolution with the same petals. When an epic companion beast used a petal, its stats would be enhanced to a certain extent. This could be seen from the test. The mythical companion beast kept digging. After a period of time, it finally dug to the trunk of the osmanthus tree. The trunk was also pitch black like ink. Just the part that was dug out was probably more than 10 meters in diameter. A giant tree with a diameter of more than 10 meters. How many osmanthus flowers will there be when it blooms? Seeing the size of the tree, everyone was surprised and delighted. Even if only 1,000th of the osmanthus tree's flowers were preserved, it was still an unimaginable number. He impatiently ordered the mythical companion beast to continue digging, but before long, the companion beast realized that the tree trunk had reached its end. It's gone. How could it be gone? Shin-Yuchi's expression was a little ugly. From the communication video, it could be seen that the gigantic osmanthus tree only had a stump left. The upper part seemed to have disappeared. The companion beasts did some digging in the vicinity, but they only found some scattered petals. They didn't find the broken trunk at all. On the tree stump, there were obvious saber and axe marks. It proved that this mysterious and huge osmanthus tree hadn't been broken due to a natural disaster. Instead, some creature had chopped it off. Even the power of a mythical companion beast can't injure the tiny roots at all. What kind of creature can actually chop off such a thick tree trunk? Shin-Yuchi was alarmed just thinking about it. Thankfully, there were no signs of dimensional creatures nearby. Furthermore, even if the trunk was gone, there were still some scattered petals nearby. To the Bureau, being able to collect these scattered petals was already a huge fortune. Furthermore, the tree stump might be of great value. Otherwise, the mysterious creature that chopped down the osmanthus tree wouldn't have needed to take away the trunk. All it needed to do was remove the petals. There was no need to go through the trouble of chopping down the tree. The digging continued. Every day they could dig out at least 10 petals. Sometimes they could even dig out dozens. This excited the Bureau and the researchers. After all, these petals didn't only represent epic companion beasts. Some legendary companion beasts with very useful skills or life providences couldn't be used because their levels were too low and their stats were too poor. Now, with these osmanthus flowers, they could raise those legendary companion beasts to the epic stage and make up for their stat. They might even give birth to powerful life souls. With the osmanthus flowers, it was equivalent to having infinite possibilities. Everyone felt that this lunar expedition would have a huge harvest, but on this day, when the mythical companion beast continued digging the tree stump, wanting to dig out all the parts of the tree stump and think of a way to transport it back to Earth, the mythical companion beast continued digging the tree stump. However, the communication between Earth's command center and the lunar space station was suddenly cut off. No one knew what had happened. The researchers tried all means to contact the moon, but there was no news from the other side. They had no way of knowing what had happened. "Professor, Can you think of a way to use the existing satellites to film the situation of the space station and the tree stump? Shin Yuchi asked the old professor. The old professor said with a heavy expression, "The location of the space station is easy to scan with satellites, but the tree stump is in a location where satellites can't capture it. Let's use the satellite to scan the space station first," Shin Yuchi said. "We're already trying, but we need to wait for our satellite to reach the predetermined orbit. Otherwise, we can only use other people's satellites. I'm afraid it will leave traces," the old professor said. "How long will it take for our satellite to capture the space station?" Shin Yuchi asked with a frown. "The exact time should be about 3 hours and 40 minutes, the old professor answered. "Wait." Shin Yuchi pondered for a moment before spitting out a word. He didn't wish to attract anyone's attention. Time ticked by as everyone waited nervously. When the satellite reached the predetermined orbit, they immediately got busy. Soon, photos of the space station's vicinity were sent back. When they saw the photo, everyone was horrified. The entire space station base had fallen into a deep pit, and the deep pit looked like the footprints of some animal. The space station seemed to have been flattened by some creature. On the moon, there's a terrifying dimensional creature. Everyone had an ominous thought. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.